Lord of Mysteries, From the Heavenly Lord's Spare Tire to the Red Priest by author Ba Ji Shou de Tuzu Lei. Chapter 411 to 426. Chapter 411, Instant Kill and Recruitment. Everything happened so suddenly that almost no one could react. By the time they did, Klein had already flung away Bishop Miller, who had been shot multiple times and completely transformed into a monster. Immediately after, he leaned back, arms spread, as if embracing the sun. A thick, pure, scorching beam of light descended from the sky, landing on Bishop Miller as he struggled to get up, completely enveloping him. The surroundings seemed to turn into day, and the howling wind also stopped at this moment. Priest of light, holy light. Looking at this pure light, the surrounding Storm Church clergy instinctively frowned, but seeing that the other person in charge did not object, they suppressed the urge to act and ran towards them, subtly encircling the three of them, including Klein. Klein, however, ignored everything around him, maintaining his posture, continuing the purification of Bishop Miller. The Sun pathway truly lived up to its reputation as the most effective pathway against monsters. In just a few seconds, Bishop Miller's body in the light pillar began to evaporate, first his epidermis, then his tentacles, and finally his flesh. During this process, Bishop Miller let out a roar of pain, causing the Storm Church members to show expressions of discomfort, averting their gazes. Some more outwardly emotional ones even cried out. Correspondingly, their gazes towards Klein became increasingly hostile. A Sequence 6 Wind Blessed was so easily killed by Klein, without any ability to resist. After the light pillar extinguished, the relatively young-looking female stepped forward, handed her identification to Klein, and asked with a cold expression. "How did you know Bishop Miller had been corrupted? I hadn't noticed anything before." Of course, it was Avon's blasphemy card that reacted. Klein took his identification and put it away, muttering to himself, then responded with equal coldness. "This concerns Military Intelligence Section 9's classified information, so I cannot speak directly. If you have any objections, you can directly question my superior, Avon Horn, Deputy Director." Captain. The Storm Church members were more experienced. By now, they had mostly sorted out what had just happened and no longer continued to surround Klein and his companions. Instead, they gathered behind the young person in charge, awaiting orders, and all looked at Klein. This caused Erland and Danitz, who stood behind Klein, to break out in a sweat. At the same time, they secretly cursed Gehrman Sparrow's bad temper. Even if he was refusing, couldn't he be a bit more tactful? What was the benefit of making things so tense? In the tense atmosphere, the young and beautiful captain suddenly smiled and then said, "I will verify this with Avon Horn, Deputy Director, but regardless, on behalf of the Storm Church, I thank you for your assistance. If you hadn't arrived, we might not have discovered the fact that Bishop Miller was corrupted, which would have led to serious consequences in the future." Klein looked at the young captain in front of him with some surprise. He hadn't expected the Storm Church members to be so easy to talk to, which didn't quite match his previous impression. "Hello, my name is Scarlet Guard. As you can see, I am a Punisher Squad captain." The young captain extended her hand to Klein and introduced herself. Klein was startled, not only because he confirmed that the woman, who was under 30, was indeed a Punisher Squad captain, but also because her surname was somewhat special. Guard is a famous surname within the Storm Church. The current pope of the Storm Church is known as Guard II, and has presided over the Storm Church's Privy Council for nearly a century, truly being the god of storms' earthly representative. In other words, the Guard family is also an angel family. No wonder, despite being a female, she could take charge of a Punisher Squad at such a young age. Klein quickly recalled information about the Guard family, but showed no hint of it on his face. He simply extended his hand, lightly shook hers, and then said coldly, "Gehrman Sparrow, Military Intelligence Section 9 Major Intelligence Officer. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Klein had no desire to interact with the beautiful woman with a profound background in front of him, as he carried too many secrets that could not be exposed. Scarlet Guard smiled charmingly and did not stop him, merely raising her hand. Klein did not linger either, directly taking Danitz and Erland and leaving the Storm Cathedral, heading towards the White Rose at the port. "Captain, why didn't you ask them why they could detect Bishop Miller's corruption?" After Klein and the two disappeared, a Punisher member with an anchor tattoo on his arm, who looked more like a pirate, asked in a low voice, puzzled. Scarlet Guard also put away her smile and said with a serious expression. That person just now used abilities from at least 3 pathways. This means he possesses a mystical item made from the Beander characteristic of a scribe, a polymath, or even a shepherd. We just went through a major battle, and we might not be able to force them to stay, and his identification is real. Upon hearing the first half of the sentence, the Punishers were not very convinced. They believed that even after a major battle, taking down Klein and his 2 companions would be easy. However, after hearing the last sentence, they reluctantly agreed with the captain's decision. They were aware of the delicate relationship between the Church and Military Intelligence Section 9. What they didn't know was that Scarlet Guard let Klein and his companions go so easily not because of their alleged Military Intelligence Section 9 identity. Her paternal grandfather was the Pope of the Storm Church. While Military Intelligence Section 9's identity was formidable in the eyes of others, it was not that big of a deal to her. The main reason she let Klein and his companions go was because her grandfather, Guard 2, had once held a meeting regarding the Two-Horn family brothers. This meant she had no authority to deal with any matters concerning the Two-Horn family brothers, only the right to report. What secret does the Horn family hold that the Church values so highly? Why did Ewan Horn know about Banshee Island? What exactly does he intend to do by sending a powerful individual like Gehrman Sparrow, whose strength is no less than any pirate general, to the sea? Many questions arose in Scarlet Guard's mind, and a strong curiosity was ignited. After dealing with the aftermath of Banshee Island, I need to inquire about Gehrman Sparrow. He will definitely not remain unknown on the sea. Through his actions, I can also investigate matters concerning Ewan Horn and even the Horn family. Thinking this, Scarlet Guard instructed her subordinates to continue clearing the traces of the battle. I never thought you were a member of Military Intelligence Section 9. What is your purpose in using me to approach our captain? On the way back to the White Rose, Danitz couldn't help but ask. Before this, he had always thought that Gehrman Sparrow was just a powerful bounty hunter, and kidnapping him was purely for ransom. But he never expected him to be a Military Intelligence Section 9 Major Intelligence Officer, which meant his purpose in kidnapping him might not be simple. What my purpose is in approaching Vice Admiral Iceberg is not for you to consider. What you should do now is to notify your captain as soon as possible that I want to see her. As for whether she sees me, that is also something your captain should consider, not for you to overstep your bounds and make decisions for her. Danitz was choked by Klein's words and almost couldn't recover, but he eventually remembered that the telegraph bureau had been destroyed, and his plan to contact the captain on Banshee Island was forced to be put on hold. Do I really have to wait until the Biam archipelago to contact the captain? Wouldn't that be too dangerous? Just as Danitz was feeling conflicted, Erland also spoke. I wrongly thought you were a dangerous lunatic. I never expected you to be from Military Intelligence Section 9. I am Captain Erland of the Navy. Using my identity as the captain of the White Rose, I help the Navy monitor and search for unstable elements, and I am also considered an peripheral member of Military Intelligence Section 9. Klein glanced at Erland, not at all surprised by his identity. When he discovered that Erland was a Beander, he had already guessed this possibility. Members like Erland are very common overseas. They often serve as an extension of the army, and usually, only those with no hope of promotion would do such things for a chance to become a Beander. Their public identity is that of a civilian, not a soldier, which also means that if they are captured by an enemy country or pirates, the army will not intervene on their behalf. After all, having active Navy personnel disguise themselves as captains of legitimate civilian ships is a typical act of espionage, undermining the hard-won tacit understanding and unwritten rules between nations. Therefore, once people like Erland are exposed, the Loan army will absolutely not acknowledge their identity. And correspondingly, people like them are also more eager to shed this identity. But once they become a Beander through the power of the army, it also means they can never leave the sea, and there is no possibility of becoming a civilian again. That is to say, their best way out is actually to be able to join Military Intelligence Section 9, where Beanders gather. So, upon learning Klein's identity, Erland realized that this might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. However, on the way, he hesitated several times, wanting to speak but not knowing how. It wasn't until they returned to the ship that he finally, after much fidgeting, said, "I heard that Avon Horn, Deputy Director, is also the first commander of the kingdom's newly formed Strategic Support Force. Will you also join this team in the future? My file has already been transferred to this army. If you are interested in joining, I can help you inquire. This unit has just been established and will also have its own ships. I believe they need experienced sailors." This was true. Avon had once complained to Klein during a casual chat that the Navy was holding him back in terms of personnel, to the point where he wanted to collect the formulas for the sailor pathway and train his own sailors. "Is this true?" Erland asked excitedly, but as soon as the words left his mouth, he knew that this matter was absolutely true. After all, he had worked in the Navy for more than 10 years and knew very well what attitude the Navy had towards a new army that might affect their status. Because the establishment of the new army was a consensus reached by the high-ranking officials of the Backland government, they dared not do anything openly, but secretly they would definitely try every possible means to cause trouble. Not providing experienced sailors was one such tactic. Having understood this, Erland hesitated a bit. After all, if he really joined the new army, his accumulated connections in the Navy would be greatly diminished. This choice was no less than a gamble for him. But thinking about his current age and his gradually dimming prospects for promotion, Erland finally gritted his teeth, stamped his foot, and said to Klein, "Please help me inquire. I am very willing to join the new army." Klein nodded, then took Danitz back to his first-class cabin. Upon returning to the cabin, Klein threw his dust-covered trench coat to Danitz, told him to wash it clean, and then returned to the bedroom. Danitz was not surprised. He directly pressed a bell switch, called a laundry maid, and paid her some money to help him wash it. Taking the blasphemy card that Klein had just returned from the altar, Avon had Aemon on his finger store it. "Klein should now be convinced that I have nothing to do with the great riot of Backland, right?" Indeed, Avon's purpose in leading Klein to Banshee Island to deal with that weather warlock, besides the fact that he was suitable, was also to completely clear his name regarding the Banshee incident. As everyone's strength gradually increased, Avon was able to use more and more of the City of Calamity's power. The origin of the monsters that appeared during the Great Riot of Backland would eventually be impossible to hide. Moreover, Avon had recently been pushing for the establishment of stable passages in the Forsaken Land of the Gods, which was also the reason why son, Derek, mentioned in the Tarot Club that there were far fewer monsters around the City of Silver. So, as long as Derek returned to the City of Silver to investigate, he would eventually discover a passage identical to the one in Backland's East Burrow. Therefore, to prevent Klein from suspecting his involvement in the Great Riot of Backland, Avon had long prepared to use Banshee Island, and some half-truths, to guide Klein into believing that the monsters that appeared during the Great Riot of Backland were due to the City of Calamity spontaneously opening a passage, and had nothing to do with him personally. Judging from the fact that Klein had just returned the blasphemy card without asking many questions, Avon's goal was basically achieved. Erland, whom Klein just mentioned, is indeed a talent, and he also helped me solve a big problem. If he hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten about this person. From this perspective, I should indeed focus my recruitment efforts on those who have no future but are ambitious. The new army had already received its new warships, but Avon still hadn't fully staffed them with the necessary sailors. He had originally intended to collect formulas and train his own, but this proved to be much more difficult than previously imagined. But thinking about it, Lowen Kingdom is, after all, the stronghold of the Storm Church. How could they allow the Beander characteristic and materials of the sailor pathway to proliferate? Klein had done Avon a great favor in this matter. Chapter 412 Paulez's Shock. Backland, North District, Pin Street. On a night when the red moon was obscured by thick clouds, it was pitch black everywhere. Only the gas streetlights on both sides of the street emitted a slight glow, illuminating the road ahead and the nearby houses. It was already late at night. Except for a few night owls, everyone was asleep, and the road was empty. The tranquility of the night was broken by the clatter of hooves. A relatively new-looking carriage stopped in front of a detached house. A young man, wearing a trench coat, with black hair and green eyes, looking very much like a poet, stepped out. He was Klein's former teammate, Leonard Mitchell, who had become a core member of the Red Gloves. He looked dazed and pale, appearing on the verge of overworking himself to death. Although he was a Beander of the Evernight pathway, the high-intensity work recently had still consumed a great deal of his energy. The Great Riot of Backland had passed a month ago, but the aftermath work was still endless. It could only be said that too many people had died in this Great Riot, and all of them had died unjustly. If left unaddressed, Backland becoming a ghost town was not an exaggeration. Therefore, even with the full assistance of the police, the three great churches were still extremely busy. It was because Beyonders of the Evernight pathway slept less. Since they slept less, they should work more. Leonard even heard that Archbishop Anthony was annoyed by the archbishops of the Storm Church and the Steam and Machinery Church. Mechanically taking out his wallet, paying the fare, and dismissing the coachman, Leonard walked towards his rented house like a zombie, completely without grace. Just as Leonard entered the yard, he seemed to hear something. His eyes suddenly sharpened. One hand touched the gun at his waist, and the other gripped a charm in his pocket. He looked at his house with vigilance. As expected of an archangel of the Marauder pathway. Even if I tried everything, I couldn't hide all my traces, and I was still discovered. The door of Pin Street number 7 opened automatically, revealing two men who looked very similar, clearly brothers. Leonard immediately recognized one of them as Ewan Horn, whom he had met in Tingen. Who the other person was, naturally, went without saying. We have long heard of Mr. Pallas Zorost's great name. We apologize for our abrupt visit. Ewan Horn bowed, showing his respect for the Archangel on Earth. Since you knew it was abrupt, couldn't you have sent an invitation in advance? Making such a surprise attack, wasn't it because you were worried that the old man wouldn't want to see you, or would even run away? Leonard couldn't help but inwardly grumble as he saw the polite and aristocratic Horn brothers. However, he knew the gravity of the situation. Although he was constantly complaining internally, he didn't voice it. After all, Earl of Ahova was an undeniable demigod, and where would he, a mere high-sequence Beander, have a say in a conversation between two high-sequence Beyonders? It's not abrupt. Since I didn't leave after Mr. Ewan Horn knew of my existence, I knew you two would eventually come knocking. All right, don't stand outside. Let's go in and talk. Leonard didn't speak, but a slightly aged voice came from him. After speaking, he took the lead, passing between the Horn brothers. As guests, Robert and Ewan Horn naturally had no objections and followed Leonard into his house. As soon as both parties were seated, unground coffee beans floated in the air, then one by one, they bounced into the coffee grinder. The tap also turned on by itself, releasing clear tap water, and the coffee pot, which had been waiting nearby, quickly came forward to collect the water. When the water was full, the coffee pot flew to the automatically opened gas stove, and the water boiled shortly after. This kid has no demands for quality of life and has never invited friends over, so he's completely unprepared. Please don't mind it. When cups of steaming coffee reached Robert and Ewan Horn's hands, Pallas Zorost within Leonard's body politely spoke again. Robert and Ewan Horn also graciously took a sip, praising his coffee-making skills. The two sides, in this somewhat insincere conversation, laid the groundwork for the upcoming discussion. May I ask what brings you two here today? Pallas Zorost originally intended to continue the attrition, but Leonard was clearly getting restless, and the longer he spoke, the more likely he was to leave his own traces, which was not conducive to hiding. So, with the two brothers opposite him showing no urgency to speak, he ultimately couldn't hold out and spoke first. Actually, the Horn brothers' late visit was also beyond Pallas Zorost's expectations. He thought they would come when Ouroboros retreated from Backland and Dante Einhorn made his move, but he didn't expect them to delay until now. Our visit this time is to seek cooperation with Mr. Pallas Zorost. Seeing that Pallas Zorost finally stopped beating around the bush, Robert exchanged glances with Ewan Horn, put down his coffee cup, and said solemnly, "What cooperation?" "Cooperation to provide Mr. Pallas Zorost with an extra escape route." The atmosphere in the living room suddenly tensed with Robert's words, because it sounded as if Pallas Zorost was being branded as a stray dog with no way out, and the Horn brothers seeking cooperation with him seemed like a handout. "Oh, I'm quite curious about that. To be honest, I can't even think of any other retreat I have." Pallas Zorost smiled, showing no trace of emotional change, and instead asked with interest. However, Leonard, his host, felt a chill run down his spine, understanding that the old man, who always appeared composed, was already enraged. The Hermits of Fate and the Secret Order are at war. The leader of the Secret Order, Zeratul, has been confirmed to be truly mad. Robert seemed oblivious to the change in atmosphere and said with a smile. With just one sentence, Pallas Zoroast understood the matter Robert wanted to cooperate on, and he was decisively moved. He was not an archangel in a complete state right now. To be precise, he was a half-crippled archangel. To be honest, if he encountered a fully functional Sequence 2 angel now, Pallas Zoroast wasn't even confident he could win. Pallas Zoroast had thought about targeting Zeratul before, but on one hand, seers were generally more cunning, and he wasn't sure if Zeratul was truly mad. On the other hand, he lacked confidence in his current strength, so this idea lingered in his mind for a while before he abandoned it himself. But now, it seemed he saw a glimmer of hope again. "Are you sure?" It sounded like Pallas Zoroast was asking Robert, but in reality, he was asking Eowyn Horn, who was sitting next to Robert. After all, Zeratul ascending the Hornassus Mountains to seek advancement was not a difficult secret for him to guess. Even when the news of Zeratul's madness spread over 100 years ago, Pallas Zoroast had guessed that he might have fallen in the Land of Night. Therefore, whether Zeratul was truly mad, the Evernight goddess knew best, and the Evernight goddess's favored ones had the most say. Zeratul is indeed mad, I can guarantee that. At this time, Klein had not yet advanced to marionettist, nor had he sought the bizarro sorcerer magic potion formula, so naturally, he hadn't released Zeratul's historical projection from the Hornassus Mountains. Thus, Eowyn Horn confidently vouched for Pallas Zoroast. In fact, when browsing Lord of the Mysteries, Eowyn Horn understood why the Evernight goddess had to use Klein's hand to release Zeratul's historical projection. It was to counterbalance Aemon. After all, there were only a few angels of the three cunning families left. If Zeratul wasn't allowed to regain his sanity, and with deities temporarily unable to personally intervene, Aemon would truly be unstoppable. I heard that a hidden organization marked by tarot cards has recently appeared. This reminds me of the Fool of the Fourth Epic. What are your thoughts on this? Who the Evernight goddess imprisoned in the Hornassus Mountains was also no secret to Pallas Zoroast. So, his first reaction after hearing about the Fool was that Antigonus had been released by the Evernight goddess. He sought Zeratul's attendant of mysteries Beander characteristic to create a fallback, to avoid Aemon, the king of angels. But if he were to provoke Antigonus, this half-fool, because of it, it would be more trouble than it was worth. Before dealing with Zeratul, he faced the pressure of a king of angels. After dealing with Zeratul, he would still face the pressure of a king of angels. Wouldn't he have dealt with Zeratul for nothing? So, Pallas Zoroast would never act rashly before clarifying things. No opinion, we know nothing about it. Eowyn Horn lied with a straight face, trying to deceive the second biggest liar in the world. But if Pallas Zoroast were to be deceived so easily, it would greatly tarnish his reputation of fighting Aemon for more than an epic. Just as he was about to speak, Robert interjected. "Mr. Pallas Zoroast, we are well aware of your concerns. But since you have reached this point, the enemies you face are just a few. It's either one or the other, there's no room for maneuver, and there's no absolutely safe choice. If you ask me, facing a potential half-fool is simpler than facing Aemon." Regardless of Pallas Zoroast's thoughts, Leonard, who had been silent, widened his eyes and looked at Robert in disbelief. Because Pallas Zoroast had once told him about Amon's terror. Aemon was a terrifying existence that could be summoned by merely saying his name too many times, yet Robert dared to openly call him by his name. He wasn't an angel yet. Where did he get such confidence? In fact, not just Leonard, Eowyn Horn was also incredulous that Robert dared to call Aemon by his true name. He dared to call the name Aemon, in reality because he possessed the City of Calamity cheat. He had captured an Amon's avatar through the City of Calamity, and could disguise himself as an avatar, thus not being discovered by other Amons. What about Robert? Robert, however, just looked at Pallas Zoroast opposite him, ignoring the astonished gazes of Leonard and Eowyn Horn. Unlike Leonard and Eowyn Horn's surprise, Pallas Zoroast, who had not left Leonard's body, was shocked for a completely different reason. Pallas Zoroast clearly felt that Robert was not looking at Leonard at all at this moment, but was directly looking at him. One must know that concealment was among the representative symbols of the Marauder pathway. Even angels of the Seer pathway and Apprentice pathway, who were also among the three cunning families, were definitely not as good at hiding as a Marauder angel. Pallas Zoroast firmly believed that if he truly wanted to hide deeply, besides Aemon possibly finding him, even a true god would not find it easy to locate him. Steed of Fate was not called that for nothing. But now, Robert could directly pinpoint him through Leonard, which also meant that Robert had means to target him. This instantly broke Pallas Zoroast's psychological safety distance. Before this, Pallas Zoroast was confident that he could leave at any time, so he was very composed. Now, he had to consider more. But even so, Pallas Zoroast was not in a hurry to escape. This was not because he trusted the character of the Horn brothers, but because he trusted the divine character of the Evernight goddess. Although the Evernight goddess had been a famous wolf since ancient times, any ally who stood in her camp felt very comfortable and praised her endlessly. This was a reputation built over countless years. After the Tingen incident, and Leonard's oath on the holy artifact not to reveal the role-playing method, Pallas Zoroast believed that the Evernight goddess knew of his existence. And the Evernight goddess had not taken any action against him afterward. Even when Leonard went to the Holy Cathedral for Red Glove's training, and he himself stepped into the place where the Evernight goddess's divine kingdom once was, it didn't provoke any punitive expedition. Pallas Zoroast understood that he was already on the Evernight goddess's chessboard and was useful to her. As long as he knew this, Pallas Zoroast was not at all worried that the Horn brothers would dare to target him, especially since Eowyn Horn was a favored one of the Evernight goddess. Moreover, the abilities Robert displayed also gave Pallas Zoroast some confidence in the idea of cooperating to target Zeratul. An out-of-control angel was much more powerful than a sane angel of the same sequence, not to mention that Pallas Zoroast was currently half-crippled. Only with strong teammates would there be a chance of success in targeting Zeratul. From the whole matter, it seems that I am the one who benefits the most from beginning to end. What do you want to gain from this? While Robert displayed his abilities, he also aroused Pallas Zoroast's apprehension. A strong teammate is very beneficial to the progress of a plan, but if a teammate is too strong, then one must worry about the risk of being stabbed in the back after the cooperation is successful. It was clear that Pallas Zoroast already believed Robert capable of delivering a fatal blow to him. A Attendant of Mysteries Beyander characteristic was not merely a powerful sealed artifact, it could also represent the friendship of a king of angels. If Robert didn't explain himself, Pallas Zoroast would absolutely not join an uncontrollable risky operation. We need you to join the Horn family's camp from now on and assist the Horn family in restoring their nation and rising to power. That is to say, in the future, including yourself, the Hermits of Fate and the Secret Order must firmly stand on our side. Mr. Pallas Zoroast, what we want is quite a lot. Chapter 413. Persuading Pales's fear. What you ask for is indeed a lot, and it's very reasonable, but have you considered what you will face if you form such an offensive and defensive alliance with me? Neither Aemon nor the Fool is easy to deal with. To dare to offend two kings of angels at the same time, I don't know whether to call you ignorantly brave or to praise your courage. Although he was already tempted by the plan Robert proposed, Pallas Zoroast still wanted to know more clearly. You are an old senior who has lived from the fourth epoch until now. You should know that the current world situation is not right, and you should also know that the apocalypse proclaimed by the doctrines of the major churches is already upon us. It is precisely because we want more that we have no choice but to desperately grasp at every straw that can increase our chances of winning. As for what happens in the future, we can't worry about that much. Aemon, who had always given up the initiative in negotiations, suddenly interjected, using the reason of time to prove their sincerity in seeking cooperation, although Aemon and Robert still didn't understand the true meaning of the apocalypse. But this was one of the few common views in the ideologies propagated by the Orthodox churches and hidden organizations, so Robert and Aemon couldn't help but take it seriously. Pales was clearly moved by Aemon's theory of time, and after a long while, he spoke. To be honest, if you really want to find a collaborator to deal with Zeratul, or even a helper for restoring your nation in the future, then that Fool should actually be a better choice. But if that fool is truly the king of angels you speak of, then in cooperating with him, we clearly won't be able to gain the initiative. And a cooperation where we can't gain the initiative, for us, is not to say dispensable, but it will certainly mean being controlled by others, which is something we do not wish to see. Robert's words were very frank. Compared to the fool, who might be a king of angels, a half-crippled archangel who needed allies might be a better choice for him. Although the words weren't very pleasant to hear, it was precisely because they were realistic that they demonstrated the truth and showed their sincerity in seeking cooperation. Pallas Zoroast didn't consider it for long before agreeing to the cooperation. After all, the conditions were there, and for him, it was indeed a good opportunity. To be honest, after an entire epic of hiding, Pales was already a bit tired. And he also knew very well in his heart that with the changing epics and the approaching apocalypse, he would sooner or later have to face Aemon directly. Therefore, in his contingency plans, when absolutely necessary, abandoning the sequence 1 Beander characteristic and surviving was also an option. So, just as Robert said, Zeratl's attendant of mysteries Beander characteristic was also a fallback for him that would not cause him to fall in status. As for the ritual to advance to attendant of mysteries, for him, an angel of the Marauder pathway, it was utterly without difficulty, one could even say it was effortless. After discussing how to intervene in the war between the Hermits of Fate and the Secret Order, Robert left first. Aemon, however, stayed behind and looked at Leonard, who hadn't been able to interject at all during the conversation, and said with a smile, "Why do you look so tired? I see you've already become a Sequence 7 nightmare, which shouldn't be the case logically. It seems you, the Deputy Director of Military Intelligence Section 9, are not very competent. You don't understand grassroots work at all. If you paid a little attention, you wouldn't say such a thing." Seeing Aemon, who was full of energy and spoke without feeling the pain, Leonard was furious and couldn't help but retort sarcastically. Aemon, however, did not feel ashamed by Leonard's sarcasm. Instead, he raised his head, smiled, and looked smug. Leonard's teeth itched when he saw him, but he could only ask impatiently, "Your brother has already left, what are you still doing here? If there's nothing, please leave. I've been working for 4 days and 4 nights straight, and I need to sleep now." 4 days and 4 nights. No wonder they say the church is efficient. You are definitely the oxen and horses that capitalists and factory owners dream of. For one person's pay, you can do several times the work of others. As soon as he mentioned working hours, Aemon couldn't help but think of the social animals from his previous life who complained about being tired just from 996, and he couldn't resist making another joke. This time, Leonard didn't want to respond to Aemon's banter at all. He simply stood up and opened the door, looking like he was going to kick him out. Seeing that Leonard wasn't in the mood to joke, Aemon stopped playing around and said righteously, all right, I won't tease you anymore. I came to see you for something serious." Seeing Aemon's serious expression, Leonard suppressed his impatience and physical fatigue, gazing at Aemon, waiting for him to continue. "I've been busy forming the Loan Kingdom Strategic Support Force. You know about this, right?" "Yes, it was in the newspapers. After all this hard work, the establishment of this army is already initially complete. Now, all that's missing are the military chaplains. I just submitted a report yesterday, asking the church to assign relevant personnel to me, and I specifically requested your team." Hearing Aemon's words, Leonard instinctively frowned, clearly not very willing to join the army. "According to the newspaper reports, I remember your strategic support force should be equipped with warships, right? Will the Storm Church allow the Church of the Night Goddess to send military chaplains to warships? The ocean is the traditional sphere of influence of the Storm Church, so military chaplains on naval warships are generally dispatched by the Storm Church. The Church of the Night Goddess, on the other hand, mostly dispatches some clergy at the fleet level to handle daily prayers, funeral services, and other matters for goddess believers in the fleet, and cannot penetrate to the grassroots level like the Storm Church. Therefore, Aemon's request for the Church of the Night Goddess to dispatch clergy to take over the religious issues of the entire force was a very rare act. On one hand, it's because when I recruited people, I deliberately recruited more believers of the goddess. On the other hand, there's a sentiment within the Navy that wants to isolate my force. While they won't actively trip us up, their uncooperative attitude is very clear. So even if the Storm Church wanted to continue interfering with my force, they would have to consider the voices within the Navy. In fact, I not only invited the Goddess's Church to send people to be stationed in the force, but I also invited the Steam and Machinery Church to send people to be stationed. Of course, since the team is still dominated by believers of the Goddess's Church will definitely be the main one, but the Steam and Machinery Church, which has little influence in the army, will definitely actively participate. I estimate they will send at least one Sequence 7 appraiser. Leonard understood that the church would not miss this opportunity to control the faith of a force and would definitely send people to be stationed, but he was unwilling to switch from a Red Gloves to a military chaplain. This wasn't due to pride, not wanting to be subordinate to Avon, but because his original intention in joining the Red Gloves was to avenge the victims of Tingen and Klein. In his eyes, if he joined Avon's army and became a resident chaplain, it would be equivalent to being tied to the army, and he would naturally be unable to participate in the church's pursuit of Ins Zangwil, unable to seek revenge. Therefore, Leonard was unwilling to accept this invitation. He believed that the captain shared his sentiment. However, Avon, in addition to being the leader of the new army, also had the identity of a favored one of the Evernight goddess. If he truly used this identity to have the church directly issue relevant orders, they would have no choice but to obey. So the best way to avoid this situation was to make Avon himself abandon this idea. We just joined the Red Gloves not long ago, and we are still a new team, currently in a period of adjustment. Moreover, the captain and I were Nighthawks before, and now we are Red Gloves, constantly investigating cases and pursuing evil cultists, and we have never done work as chaplains or the like. Thank you very much for your high regard, but I think you'd better find someone else. Because he was rejecting the other party, Leonard was no longer impatient at this time. Instead, he spoke kindly and persuasively. You're worried that after joining my team, you'll miss out on the operation to pursue Ins Zangwil in the future, and won't be able to personally take revenge, right? Avon looked at Leonard with a smile, directly revealing his true thoughts. That's right, so even for Klein's sake, you can't do this. Don't forget that Klein is your friend too. Seeing Avon directly expose his thoughts, Leonard simply stopped pretending and wanted a clear answer from Avon. I knew you would think that. I came today to give you a heads up about this. In fact, I just want you to persuade Dunn Smith, who must have the same idea. Leonard remained silent, just quietly watching Avon, to see how he would persuade him. Dunn Smith is different from you. There are many things I can't say directly, but you are different, I can tell you. Let me put it this way, you will only have the opportunity to face Ins Zangwil if you join my team, and this will not take longer than half a year. Leonard's pupils contracted, and he tried his best to suppress his excitement. Is that true? Are you sure? I'm sure. I can't say anything more specific, but you should believe me. Avon's answer was exceptionally certain. After all, he had read the original novel. Although many things had changed, the matter of Ins Zangwil involved the development of the entire world situation. As long as the transaction between Adam and the Evernight goddess did not change, this matter would be resolved quickly. It might even happen earlier than in the original novel due to Avon's butterfly effect. Leonard quickly calmed down and said to Avon solemnly, I believe you, and I will persuade the captain to accept this arrangement, but please also remember what you said today and don't go back on your word. Don't worry, I've never failed to deliver on something I've promised. All right, I won't stay any longer. You should get some rest quickly. I estimate that in a few hours, your captain will summon you to continue working. After Leonard agreed, Avon teased him again, then a flash of fire appeared on his body, and he disappeared. Leonard watched this scene and couldn't help but frown again. Eowyn, Horn seems to have improved again. Such a fast advancement speed. Is this the quality of a favored one of the goddess? Indeed, it's quite fast. Even in the fourth epic when the role-playing method was public, there were few demigods who advanced so quickly. My premonition back then was not wrong. This Eowyn, Horn also has a big secret. Pallas Zorost's words almost scared Leonard half to death. Demigod. He has already advanced to Sequence 4 demigod. The first time Leonard saw Avon, he was already a Sequence 8 midnight poet, and Avon was just an ordinary person who hadn't even consumed a Beander potion. But now, he had only advanced to Sequence 7 nightmare, while Avon had already become a Sequence 4 demigod. Guess. Pallas Zoroast, in order to pass the boring parasitic life, liked to tease Leonard when he had nothing to do. This was also why Leonard was so unamused by Avon, he was teased too many times normally. I guess you're telling the truth. Although the old man always flirted with him glibly, Leonard didn't think the old man would tease him about this matter. Congratulations, you guessed right, but there's no reward. Pales's words were still as irritating as before, but Leonard was no longer in the mood to argue with him, his mind filled with those few words. From an ordinary person to a demigod in 5 months. After a long while, Leonard came back to his senses, but his expression changed from dispirited to invigorated. This is a good thing. If Eowyn Horn's words are not wrong, we will have to face Ince Zangwill in at most half a year. In this short amount of time, it will be very difficult for the captain and me to advance to demigod. But if Avon can join the revenge, then revenge is no longer a pipe dream. Seeing that Leonard had not lost confidence due to Avon's advancement speed, Pales, who had been constantly monitoring his mental state, also breathed a sigh of relief. Right. You can push the matter of revenge onto others, and you can also relieve your psychological burden, right? Although he no longer had to worry that Leonard would lose confidence because of Avon's advancement, Pales was now worried that Leonard would become complacent and lose his previous enthusiasm for serious role-playing because of Avon's advancement. This time, Leonard did not retort with sarcasm. Instead, he said solemnly, "How is that possible? Even if Avon truly advances to demigod, and even his brother, who dares to scheme against an angel with you, is willing to help. It will still be extremely difficult to kill Ince Zangwill. After all, he still has that 0-level sealed artifact, of which only the number and appearance are known. So you don't have to worry that I will just give up. On the contrary, I am now more eager to engage in deep role-playing and advance as quickly as possible." Pales was very pleased to see that Leonard's mind remained clear at this moment. "By the way, don't just talk about me. Since Avon is already a demigod, then Avon's brother wouldn't already be an angel, would he?" Leonard asked the question that had been bothering him since just now. After all, a demigod daring to scheme against an angel, or even an archangel, no matter how Leonard thought about it, it felt too unbelievable. "No, but I think he's even scarier than a normal angel." Pallas Zoroast did not hide his apprehension towards Robert at all. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Chapter 414, Benson becomes a Beander. Robert's secret might be beyond my imagination. Avon, after leaving Leonard's house, repeatedly replayed the negotiation in his mind, coming to a very firm conclusion. Avon had revealed the matter of Pales to Robert a few days prior, offering him an option to seek more benefits in the Great War between the Hermits of Fate and the Secret Order. He had originally only intended to inform Robert, and then prepare to approach Pales himself to try and establish a loose alliance between them. After all, even if Pales was in a poor state, he was still an archangel. If he could be persuaded to cooperate with the Horn family like the Life Counselor, Avon would have been content. But he didn't expect Robert to show such strong interest in Pales, actively requesting to meet him to discuss cooperation. One must know that without Avon's cover, personally negotiating cooperation was a very risky move. If Pales were to expose the Horn family's ambitions to the Augustus family, there would be no room for reconciliation given the current situation, and all their previous efforts would be in vain. The Life Counselor had proactively sought cooperation, first demonstrating great sincerity, and at the same time, was an enemy of the Augustus family, which allowed Robert and Avon to trust him and form a deep alliance. But they did not have such a high level of trust with Pales, especially without the deterrence of force. Regarding Avon's concerns, Robert merely smiled them off, insisting on personally handling the cooperation talks. And throughout the negotiation, Pales did not look down on the Horn family, always maintaining a relatively equal stance in discussions, and did not even raise objections regarding whether the Horn family had the strength to target Zeratul. All these signs made Avon firmly believe that Robert and Pales had engaged in a contest he hadn't perceived. Robert was truly speaking to Pales from a position of strength, and Pales evidently recognized Robert's strength. This made Avon recall how the life counselor was clearly unwilling to have too much contact with him, yet was willing to invest in Robert in advance. The Great Riot of Backland, where Robert unexpectedly killed an immortal demoness, and Pales's attitude this time. Avon was convinced that Robert held a very deep secret, a secret that might even make Adam extremely wary. Actually, Avon had long suspected that Robert had secrets, but due to the unspoken understanding between them, neither had delved deeper. But now, Avon was genuinely intrigued by Robert's secret. However, his relationship with Robert was too special, which meant he couldn't probe him as he would an enemy. He could only silently observe in the days to come. Because of Robert's intervention, Avon no longer needed to participate in the operations against the Hermits of Fate and the Secret Order. His energy would now return to training his forces and dealing with Maxim. Backland, inside a coffee shop near King's Avenue. Melissa gently stirred her lemon tea with a spoon, occasionally wiping the water droplets from the window with a tissue. Her black veil hat lay beside her, and a plate of the cheapest toast sat before her, untouched. She had initially worried that sitting there for too long would displease the coffee shop owner, but then she noticed that the cafe's waitstaff showed no intention of rushing customers, instead frequently refilling coffee for patrons waiting for their exams to finish, just like her. Time passed minute by minute, the mist on the glass window grew thicker, and Melissa found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on the person beside her. The entire coffee shop seemed to grow quieter and quieter. "They're out. They're out." An urgent voice broke the silence of the coffee shop. Almost everyone left their seats and rushed to the glass window to look outside. Melissa, who had seen Benson through the window earlier, struggled to push her way out. When she finally squeezed out of the coffee shop, she realized she had forgotten her veil hat on the table. She considered going back, but seeing the crowded coffee shop, she could only give up on the idea. "Hey, what are you thinking about?" Benson patted Melissa's shoulder, glanced at the coffee shop, and asked with concern. "Oh, nothing, I just left my veil hat in the coffee shop. By the way, how did you do on your exam today? Were the questions difficult?" "It might have been difficult for others, but I had no problems at all. Arithmetic has always been my specialty." Benson looked around, saw everyone talking and no one paying attention to him, then chuckled and said, "When the exam ended, I saw many people's papers with large blank spaces, complaining and pounding their chests when the papers were collected. Did they really think the government would hire another arithmetic secretary for ordinary government employees? If that were the case, what's the difference between hiring a baboon and hiring them?" Melissa secretly let out a sigh of relief, then looked around. She saw many people loudly complaining about the difficulty of the exam, suspecting that such difficult questions were given because many positions were already pre-arranged. "Benson, if you're really confident, you should be thinking about the interview now. You must prepare a new set of decent clothes." Before she could finish, Melissa's expression dimmed, and she couldn't continue, because their newest formal wear had been buried with Klein. Seeing this, Benson could only sigh slightly, his joy from the end of the exam completely gone. But he forced a smile and said, "Let's think about that tomorrow. What we should be thinking about now is which restaurant we should go to celebrate." Just as Melissa instinctively wanted to save money, a slightly familiar voice came from beside them. "Of course, you should celebrate at this time, but while celebrating, you also need to consider the issue of finding a house to settle in Backland. By the way, is this veil hat yours?" Benson and Melissa looked in the direction of the voice and saw a handsome man with black hair and blue eyes, dressed in casual clothes, holding a veil hat and looking at them. Melissa immediately recognized the veil hat in his hand as the one she had left in the coffee shop. "That's my hat, thank you, Mr. Avon." Taking the veil hat and putting it on, Melissa thanked Avon, while a hint of doubt arose in her heart. How did Mr. Avon appear here, and how did he get my hat? At the same time, Melissa noticed that the coffee shop was still crowded. "Long time no see, Mr. I didn't expect to meet you here." Benson was equally impressed by Avon, a classmate who had proactively come to repay money even after Klein's death, not to mention that the Moretti family's assets and Klein's pension were all managed by the person in front of him. "No, you shouldn't call me Mr., but rather Baron. You must have broken the kingdom's record for ennoblement, right?" Benson shook hands with Avon, unable to help but exclaim, The news of Avon being ennobled as a baron had been extensively reported in the Tingen City newspapers. Tingen City was, after all, the Horn family's stronghold, so there was no psychological pressure in boasting about Avon. This is actually thanks to my brother, it's nothing worth mentioning. Avon naturally couldn't explain his accomplishments in military intelligence Section 9, so he casually attributed it to the prestige of Robert and the Ahova Earl's court, changing the subject. Have you considered the housing issue I just mentioned? Although I'm confident I'll pass this second written exam, there's still an interview to come. Isn't it a bit too early to be thinking about a house now? By the way, is Your Excellency the Baron here for something? Benson suddenly felt that this meeting might not be a coincidence, the other party might have specifically come to find him. I came here specifically for you, and you don't really think Klein's legacy consists only of those investments and the pension, do you? Blackthorn Security Company has long-term cooperation with government departments, has a very deep background, and also places great importance on the pension work for martyrs' families. So, as long as you can pass the written exam, there's no way the interview stage will have any problems. Therefore, it's not too early for you to consider settling in Backland. Benson and Melissa exchanged glances, unable to hide their surprise. They both didn't believe Avon would lie about this matter. But if this was true, then it was truly astonishing. After all, in this era of rapid industrial development and extreme exploitation of people by people, those who died often had no value. Except for officers who died for the country in war and received a certain pension, they had never heard of any employer providing a pension before. Benson had relied on their father's pension to support both Klein and Melissa's schooling. So, when they initially received Klein's £6,000 in pension, Benson and Melissa were both greatly surprised. They had originally thought that after receiving that pension, they would have no further connection with Blackthorn Security Company, as that amount was truly enough to buy out a life. But they never expected to hear from Avon today that Blackthorn Security Company would silently help their surviving family members even after paying for a life. How could this not surprise them and warm their hearts? Is this true? Benson still asked, somewhat disbelievingly. Avon smiled slightly, not at all surprised by Benson's reaction, and nodded, saying, "Of course, it's true. Do you remember Dunn Smith and Leonard? They were Klein's teammates during his lifetime, and they are both working in Backland now. They've been running around for your matter these past few days." Avon had no intention of taking credit, so he directly brought up Dunn Smith and Leonard's involvement. "Then do you know where their homes are? I'd like to thank them in person." Benson and Melissa certainly remembered Dunn Smith and Leonard. After all, they were Klein's teammates during his lifetime, and both had appeared at the funeral to carry Klein's coffin. "I don't know where they live, only where they work. But you don't need to rush to inquire, I think they might come looking for you in the next few days." Benson nodded and didn't ask any more questions. In fact, based on his many years of experience in society, he had vaguely sensed the extraordinary nature of Blackthorn Security Company, so he wisely didn't delve deeper. Baron Avon said he came specifically to find us, and he mentioned the house. "Has he prepared a house for us?" Melissa had been silently observing Avon and suddenly spoke. "You can just call me Avon, no need to call me Baron. As for the house, let's talk while we eat. Benson has been taking an exam all morning, so he must be tired now." Unknowingly, they arrived at what appeared to be a relatively high-end restaurant. Benson and Melissa looked at the greeter outside the door and the luxurious decorations around them, their hearts sinking. But seeing Avon had already walked in first, they could only brace themselves and follow. After entering the private room, Avon, acting as the host, ordered meals for the Moretti siblings, then took out the contract Klein had given him before leaving Backland. "My investment fund has been managing your assets. You know about the epidemic that occurred in Backland a month ago. Although the epidemic didn't last long, it dealt a heavy blow to Backland. So, houses in Backland have been at a low price during this period. After hearing that you plan to take a position here in Backland, I bought a house. If you need it, you can move in directly. If not, consider it an investment." When it came to buying a house, Benson didn't dare to be careless and immediately began to review the documents and contract Avon had brought. While Benson was reviewing the contract, Avon drank tea and chatted with Melissa. "Benson's job is basically confirmed. What about you? Are you preparing to take the entrance exam for Backland Industrial University? Because the bill to upgrade Backland Technical College to Backland Industrial University was passed in Parliament 2 weeks ago, and even the government allocation was equivalent to Backland University. This was the Augustus family's reward to the Steam and Machinery Church for sending an angel with 007 to assist in expelling Ouroboros and besieging the Life Counselor, and also a gesture of drawing them in. Although the siege ultimately failed, the Steam and Machinery Church did not shirk its duties during the operation, so the Augustus family's gratitude could not be diminished in the slightest. Because of this bill, the Augustus family used a lot of political resources, even causing a major upheaval in academia. However, fortunately, after some struggles, the bill was still passed. I'm currently preparing intensely, but I still feel uncertain about competing with the nation's most outstanding students. Melissa seemed a little shy, not daring to look Avon directly in the eye, and said softly, "You'll be fine. We've discussed math problems before, and you have a very good mathematical mind, and mathematics is the foundation of all sciences." At this moment, Benson had finished reading the contract in his hand and said with a smile, "The contract has no problems. I'll go see the property in person later, and if there are no major issues, I'll sign it." Avon stared at Benson, his eyes deep and slightly meaningful, saying, "Although a purchase contract isn't as simple as a rental contract, there are many loopholes that can be exploited. Aren't you going to ask a professional lawyer to look at it?" "No need. I've been studying the kingdom's laws recently. Although I wouldn't say I'm proficient, I have no problem understanding a contract." Benson waved his hand, saying with a hint of pride, Chapter 415, Tamara and Melissa's Acuity. "I can vouch for that." Recently, Benson, besides studying for his exams, has also been reading books on law. He even offers simple legal advice to the neighbors, and it's always been effective, helping them solve many problems. If it weren't for the university diploma requirement to enter court, I reckon Benson might have applied for a judicial position. Melissa endorsed Benson's abilities from the side, her tone filled with both regret and pride. "Oh, if you're really that interested in law, Benson, the diploma issue isn't insurmountable." Avon immediately offered his help in this regard. Benson was clearly tempted, but after some thought, he shook his head and said, "Let's not. I'm also very sensitive with numbers, and a job in the Ministry of Finance suits me perfectly. By the way, I haven't asked what you do, Avon. Are you managing a family company?" "No, actually, the family assets are always managed by professionals. I just do spot checks from time to time. My main profession is a soldier. If you read the Backland newspapers, you'd know I've been forming a new army recently. And before taking on the task of forming a new army, I was working at Military Intelligence Section 9. Avon said casually while directing the waiter on how to arrange the dishes. When she heard the name Military Intelligence Section 9, Melissa didn't react much, but Benson clearly froze, then his face turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Melissa, however, seemed oblivious to her brother's unusual state and asked curiously, "Military Intelligence Section 9, what do they do?" "Nothing much. It's just an organization that protects the safety of the royal family, guards state secrets, and tracks down enemy spies. Because it operates discreetly and secretly, many ordinary people don't know about Military Intelligence Section 9. Benson, are you feeling hot? Why don't we open the window?" Avon didn't forget to show concern for Benson while answering Melissa's question. "It is a bit warm, perhaps because of the delicious food." "No need to open the window, it might get better in a moment." Benson stopped the waiter from opening the window and wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Oh, I thought you were unwell. Come, the lobster here is exceptional. You two should eat it while it's hot." Avon gently let Benson off the hook and urged them to eat. This restaurant was a place Avon frequented. With his sophisticated palate from his previous life, the deliciousness of the food here was self-evident. Melissa, despite her best efforts to maintain a ladylike demeanor, visibly saw the food on her plate diminishing. Benson, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. No matter how delicious the food was at this moment, he couldn't taste its goodness. He was restless. Mid-meal, Melissa went to the restroom, leaving Avon and Benson alone in the private room. Benson looked at Avon, who was leisurely savoring his food, his face full of struggle. But finally, he gritted his teeth and spoke with great determination. I suppose you've already noticed that I've become a Beander, Avon. I have nothing to say about that and won't try to explain. I only hope that for Klein's sake, you won't involve Melissa. Clearly, Benson had some understanding of the Beander world and knew the official power's attitude towards wild Beyonders. So, upon learning that Avon was a member of Military Intelligence Section 9, he held no hope and only wished that he hadn't implicated his sister. Can you tell me how you became a Beander? Avon didn't respond to Benson's request but instead pressed him for the reason he became a Beander. Because in the now declassified original work of Lord of the Mysteries, there was no mention of Benson becoming a Beander, especially during this time period. Coupled with his understanding of Klein's personality, he was basically certain that Klein would not deliberately guide his brother into the dangerous Beander world in the future. This led to the inference that Benson's current status as a Beander was influenced by Avon's butterfly effect. Avon had been in this world for several months, and even the backland smog had changed because of him. Large blank sections appeared in the Lord of the Mysteries in his mind, and the world's situation had undergone significant changes because of him. From this perspective, Benson's unexpected transformation into a Beander didn't seem like a big deal. However, an innate sense of vigilance made Avon disagree. This wasn't just because Benson was Klein's brother, one of Klein's deepest bonds. It was also because Benson and Melissa were among the few ordinary people in Avon's social circle. So, if someone paid attention to Avon, by tracing his experiences, they could easily discover Avon's concern for the Moretti siblings. This meant that the Moretti siblings could potentially become a weak point for those with ulterior motives to target Avon. Avon wasn't being overly paranoid, it was just that there had been too many personal actions targeting him recently. There were domestic ones from LotM, and also foreign ones, not to mention demigods like Maxim, who had angels backing him. With the establishment of the new army, Avon was gradually stepping onto the world stage, catching the eye of various major powers, and with that came endless attention and targeting. This was inevitable. In other words, Avon was now a significant figure in the world, qualified to be targeted by all sides. If Benson were to be harmed because of Avon, then no matter how you looked at it, Avon wouldn't be able to explain himself to Klein. So, he had to press the issue, even refusing to give Benson a clear answer about not involving Melissa, just to maintain pressure and make him tell the truth. Benson, upon hearing this, was indeed secretly angry, but as the saying goes, when under someone's roof, one must bow their head. After losing Klein, Melissa was his greatest concern, and he would never allow her to be harmed because of him. So, he could only pull out an ordinary-looking, palm-sized flute from his pocket, place it on the table, and say in a deep voice, "It was a lady who claimed to be from the Tamara family who helped me become a lawyer. After I became a Beander, she gave me this item and said that someone would contact me naturally when I arrived in Backland, and then I just needed to give this to him. That's all I know." Avon knew Benson was hiding something but didn't care. Instead, his attention was focused on the small flute on the table. This flute looked ordinary, its material resembling stone, and it bore no discernible markings. Yet, Avon secretly used his demoness divination, but couldn't get any useful information from it. It's important to know that Avon was also a demigod-level demoness, highly skilled in divination, and had the blessing of the City of Calamity. For him to be unable to obtain any information, the extraordinary nature of this flute was evident. Avon secretly mobilized the power of the City of Calamity, even having an Amon avatar stand in front, making full preparations before reaching out his left hand to grasp the flute. However, this flute never displayed any special characteristics throughout. And Avon, holding the flute, didn't obtain any useful information, as if it were just an ordinary flute. However, precisely because of the flute's extraordinary nature, Avon also confirmed that Benson was not in danger. "Don't worry, you are Klein's brother. I won't arrest you and lock you up in Military Intelligence Section 9's underground as a test subject. Also, you don't have to worry about that lady looking for you again, because your mission is complete." Avon glanced at Benson, who was looking at him with extreme nervousness, and couldn't help but smile as he spoke. Upon hearing the first half of the sentence, Benson couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But when he heard the second half, he was bewildered and froze on the spot. However, Benson had been in society for many years and quickly reacted, pointing at the flute, then at Avon himself, unable to speak. That's right. That lady probably wanted to use you to deliver this flute into my hands. In that sense, you've been implicated by me. Avon had initially thought someone was trying to use Benson to harm him, but he quickly dismissed that idea. Because if she truly wanted to harm him, that lady wouldn't have needed to help Benson advance, thereby arousing his vigilance. She could have simply disguised herself as an ordinary person, claiming she wanted Benson to deliver something to Avon, which would have been much more unexpected. Moreover, it proved that the flute hadn't been used to harm Avon. At least, Avon couldn't detect any tricks on it at the moment. On the contrary, the other party helping Benson advance to a lawyer was more about showing goodwill. Avon's understanding of the Tamara family flashed through his mind instantly. The Tamara family was one of the 5 great angel families of the 4th epic Tudor dynasty, controlling the Arbiter pathway. Later, it maintained a long-term marital relationship with the Abraham family, jointly controlling the apprentice pathway Beander characteristic, and also controlling the Black Emperor pathway. This was Military Intelligence Section 9's internal description of the Tamara family. And as Avon knew, the Tamara family had once undergone a split. One branch, after obtaining resources for the apprentice pathway from the Abraham family, completely abandoned the Arbiter and Lawyer pathways. After the 5th epic began, they established Theosophy order with demoness who advanced as females. All this information was a secret Avon learned from Christina after capturing her. But according to Christina, although Theosophy order was an organization jointly established by 2 major forces, she rarely saw people from the Tamara family in her daily life and knew very little about them. The lady who met Benson shouldn't be from Theosophy order, but from another branch of the Tamara family. Otherwise, it would be more convenient for them to contact me through Theosophy order. There's no need to go through such a roundabout way. And if that lady is from another branch of the Tamara family, then it's very interesting. Is this flute really for me? After all, that branch of the Tamara family, if I'm not mistaken, should have always adhered to the Arbiter and Lawyer pathways. Looking at it this way, I also seem like a delivery donkey. Avon couldn't figure out what connection the Tamara family had with him, so he naturally thought of Robert. Upon hearing Avon's explanation, Benson breathed a huge sigh of relief. Although it was a pity to lose the channel for further advancement by cutting ties with that lady, he also understood the risks of dealing with such mysterious forces, especially given that he had already been exposed to Military Intelligence Section 9's eyes. Avon, I want to ask you something. Is Klein also a Beander? Benson pondered for a moment, then finally asked the question he had been wanting to explore ever since his advancement. After learning about the existence of the Beander world and becoming a lawyer, Benson had a vague feeling that something was off, but he never thought deeply about it, so he had overlooked it. But now, looking back, Klein's job, his rapid salary increases, the generous pension, and the immense power that ensured he passed his interviews, all were points of suspicion. Avon didn't answer immediately. He just glanced at the door of the private room and said with a smile, "If you want to listen, come in. Don't hide outside and eavesdrop." To Benson's astonished gaze, Melissa pushed the door open and returned to her seat. You must have noticed Benson's abnormality early on, and also the issue with Klein's identity, right? You deliberately mentioned Benson's legal expertise in front of me just now, wanting to use me to confirm Benson's safety, didn't you? When Avon noticed that Melissa hadn't gone to the restroom after leaving the private room but had been eavesdropping outside the door, he realized he had been outmaneuvered by Melissa. Melissa glanced at her dumbfounded brother and nodded in admission. I noticed Benson's abnormality a long time ago. And coincidentally, during that period, I also learned about the Beander world through an acquaintance, learning about the other side of the world, so I've been very worried about Benson. It just so happens that you came to see us today, Mr. Avon, so I wanted to use you to see if my brother had been tempted by an evil god. Benson looked at the usually obedient Melissa, unsure what to say. After a long while, he finally reacted, grabbed Melissa's shoulders, and asked urgently. How much do you know about the Beander world? Have you advanced? Because of the lady's teachings, Benson knew many inside details of the Beander world, even the role-playing method. And precisely because he knew so much, he had a deeper understanding of the dangers of the Beander world and was very worried that Melissa would embark on a path of no return. Melissa, however, pouted somewhat dejectedly and said, "No, I don't have the money to buy the materials, nor have I found the potion formula for the ritual." Melissa had visited the Beander material trading market at the Evil Dragon Bar several times with Isabella, and had seen a few formulas, but none of them suited her. "Did you also guess Klein's identity?" Avon looked at Melissa, his admiration growing stronger. Not only did she discover Benson's abnormality early, but upon meeting him, she immediately thought of using him to ascertain Benson's condition. This method was like an antelope hanging its horns. It seemed ordinary, but it had a profound simplicity to it. "Klein should be a Nighthawk of the Church of the Evernight, right?" Melissa's words sounded like a question, but her tone was unusually certain. Chapter 416, Melissa's Request, Klein's Decision. "Why do you think Klein is a Nighthawk of the Evernight Goddess Church?" Avon wanted to know how much Melissa knew, so he smiled and asked back. "After I learned about the existence of the Beander world, I always suspected that Klein had become a Beander, and one with an official background. Later, I secretly went to Blackthorn Security Company and found that although it looked inconspicuous, it was actually backed by St. Selena Cathedral. At that time, I guessed that Klein might have joined the Nighthawks." Avon looked at Melissa with great admiration, and after she finished speaking, he glanced at Benson. Both learned about the existence of the Beander world, but Benson was not as sharp as Melissa. Benson saw the look Avon gave him, scratched his head, and smiled awkwardly. Not only did he not notice the suspicious points about Klein, but he didn't even realize his sister's discovery of his Beander identity. If it were anyone else, he might have been reported long ago, and he would probably be in the church's underground prison now, becoming a legendary experimental subject. That's right, Klein joined the Nighthawks because of a Beander incident involving an illegal ritual. In the end, to prevent the advent of an evil god in Tingen and to save Tingen, he sacrificed his life. Avon put away his teasing smile and very solemnly recounted Klein's deeds. Both Benson and Melissa were lost in thought. Benson even murmured, "So what they said was true, and not exaggerated in the slightest. Klein truly sacrificed himself to protect the innocent." The Moretti siblings, one was just a low-level Beander in the Beander world, and the other hadn't even truly stepped through the door of the Beander world. But the term, evil god, was enough to make them realize how great a thing Klein had done. This also filled their hearts with an unprecedented sense of pride and sorrow. Klein's former smile seemed to appear before their eyes. "You are a member of Military Intelligence Section 9, and I am an unofficial Beander. How will you deal with me?" Although Avon had clearly stated that he wouldn't arrest him, Benson still wanted to know Avon's arrangements for him. After all, he was still involved with that woman from the Tamara family. With an uncertain future, he was inevitably uneasy. No special treatment. Actually, official organizations don't arrest every wild Beander. They also assess people of good character as informants. If the pathway is suitable, they don't rule out recruiting them into their team. I now declare that you will be an informant for Military Intelligence Section 9 from now on. Your main task is to monitor all situations within the Ministry of Finance that might endanger the kingdom's security and to protect the Ministry of Finance's secrets from being stolen by enemy nations. Regarding Benson's internal worries, Avon smiled and offered a solution that greatly surprised Benson. What seemed like a life-threatening matter in Benson's eyes was nothing to Avon. "Afterward, I will have someone send you the corresponding documents and create a relevant file for you. Your potion will be recorded in the file as being provided by me. Don't let this slip out in the future." Avon's subordinates had not all advanced normally, either their advancement speed was too fast, or their origins were problematic. So, Avon often had to alter relevant files, making him very skilled at it. It was almost a standard, fixed procedure. "Ah. This is really too much trouble for you. Thank you so much." Benson hadn't expected Avon to directly assign him an identity with Military Intelligence Section 9, completely resolving his hidden dangers and even whitewashing the origin of his potion. His heart was filled with gratitude. As a man of society, Benson knew too well the importance of official prepared by. It could be said that all his worries after becoming a Beander vanished at this moment. But at the same time, he was somewhat worried about his mission. Is monitoring the Ministry of Finance for Military Intelligence Section 9 something that can be done? Theoretically, it's not allowed, and even strictly forbidden. But when an intelligence agency develops to a certain extent, this situation is bound to occur. This is also the most important reason why Military Intelligence Section 9 was split up. Actually, I don't expect you to truly monitor the Ministry of Finance. It's just that your duties will be recorded as such in your file. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a reasonable reason to recruit you. Benson nodded, then thanked Avon again for the arrangement. Seeing that Benson and Avon had finished their discussion, Melissa spoke again. May I ask if all the culprits in the incident that led to Klein's sacrifice have been brought to justice? Can you tell us more details? Melissa had met Adernizer at the Evil Dragon Bar, heard his story, and his confusion about Tingen not being destroyed months ago. So when Avon mentioned Klein's death in the Evil God Advent incident, she immediately connected the two and could imagine how urgent the situation was at the time. Therefore, she found it hard to believe that no culprits responsible for Klein's death had escaped. Although both Dunsmith and Leonard had repeatedly emphasized to them that all relevant culprits had been apprehended, Melissa had always had doubts deep down. Benson also looked at Avon, who fell into contemplation. Except when devising schemes, he wasn't accustomed to lying about other matters. This was also to ensure greater credibility when he did lie in the future. However, Ince Zangwill and 008 truly couldn't be mentioned, so after much consideration, Avon could only vaguely say, Klein's former colleagues are actively pursuing the culprits, and I'm also helping. Don't worry, we will definitely avenge Klein. Benson and Melissa's hearts sank, knowing that some culprits had indeed escaped justice, and that they couldn't get more information from Avon. This made Benson and Melissa deeply feel their weakness and powerlessness, and their desire to continue advancing and become Beyonders grew stronger. Mr. Avon, do you know where I can collect the Savon potion formula? Melissa very straightforwardly asked the trustworthy person in front of her who might be able to help. Benson, upon hearing this, initially wanted to object, but thinking of Melissa's mature and independent performance today, he didn't make a sound in the end. It's simple. You convert to the god of steam and machinery, then get into Backland Industrial University, show your talent for machinery during your studies, and then show a little understanding and yearning for the Beander world. Someone will naturally come to find you. Do I have to convert? Melissa asked in surprise, but then immediately realized. How could the Steam and Machinery Church allow heretics to join their core departments? This gave Melissa a headache. After all, the Moretti family had always been loyal believers of the Evernight goddess from beginning to end, and she could never convert. Besides this pathway, are there other ways to obtain the Savon potion formula? Melissa asked again, unwilling to give up, but Avon could only shake his head. Benson was one thing, he had already become a Beander. But for Melissa's matter, Avon would definitely have to ask Klein's opinion. He couldn't overstep his bounds. Then Benson asked some more questions about Leonard and Dunsmith, and Avon told him everything he could. After dinner, Avon accompanied them to see the apartment in Sherwood Borough. Benson and Melissa were both very satisfied with the house, especially the exquisite interior decoration. Benson finally signed the contract Avon provided, officially accepting the house. After parting ways with the Moretti siblings, Avon went to his safe house nearby and prayed to Mr. Fool for an urgent meeting with Mr. World in his divine kingdom. Within a few minutes, Avon found himself in the palace above the gray fog. Only he and Klein were in the entire palace. Is there something that requires an urgent contact with me? Klein first bowed respectfully to the empty seat of Mr. Fool, then asked. Ever since I advanced to a demigod, Klein has been reinforcing the existence of Mr. Fool through various actions, avoiding exposing himself in front of me. It seems that my advancement to demigod has indeed put a lot of pressure on Klein. Avon had long noticed Klein's actions, but they had become particularly severe recently. And all Avon could do was continue to play along with him. After also bowing to Mr. Fool's seat, Avon looked at Klein and said, Today is the second government employee exam. Benson took the exam in Backland, and I went to see him. Klein didn't understand why Avon would contact him urgently about this matter, but he couldn't help but ask with concern. How was it? How did Benson do on the exam? He did well. The next tests will be handled by Dunsmith and Leonard, so there won't be any problems. Avon had no intention of taking credit for this matter, so he directly stated the role Leonard and the others played in it. And after Klein heard it, his heart indeed felt warm. They haven't forgotten me. That's right, they even voluntarily joined the Red Gloves to avenge me, so how could they forget my family? A wave of emotion called gratitude constantly rippled in Klein's heart. But Klein quickly regained his senses, frowned, and asked in confusion. You asked Mr. Fool to meet me here, not just to talk about this, right? Of course not. This isn't an urgent matter. It's just that today, when I went to see Benson to hand over the house you bought for him, I found that Benson had already become a lawyer, and Melissa had already guessed that you joined the Nighthawks. Avon directly dropped a bomb on Klein, leaving him utterly stunned. What on earth is going on? Explain it more clearly. Klein immediately became anxious. After realizing that he had long been noticed by the goddess and didn't need to worry about explaining his resurrection, he still chose not to reveal his identity for a reason. One aspect of doing this was to hide himself in the dark, so as not to be exposed to Ince Zangwill, which would create good conditions for future revenge. On the other hand, he had fully witnessed the fierce struggles of the Beyonder world, where a slight misstep could lead to being drawn into the conflicts of high-sequence Beyonders. And the aftereffects of these struggles could easily destroy a family or even a city. With the gray fog on him, and with many things clearly going to happen around him, keeping away from Benson and Melissa was the best protection for them. But just as Klein was determined to implement this strategy, someone suddenly informed him that Benson and Melissa had either stepped into the Beyonder world or had investigated the cause of his death. How could this not make Klein feel indignant? His first reaction was that someone had deliberately involved Benson and Melissa to scheme against him. Klein's reaction did not exceed Avon's expectations, so he used the shortest possible words to clearly explain what he had seen and heard today. So, Benson became a donkey carrying goods in the eyes of others because of you. Melissa accidentally discovered the Beyonder world, so she saw through my Nighthawk identity. Generally speaking, that's how it is. However, I feel that the Tamara family is more likely to be targeting my brother, not me. After all, I am a hunter, not an arbiter, and the Tamara family controlled the arbiter pathway in the fourth epoch. Avon directly shifted the blame to Robert without any hesitation. Klein looked speechlessly at Avon, who had an innocent expression, and didn't know whether he should blame Avon. After all, it was his request for Avon to take care of Benson and Melissa. If someone approached Benson because of this connection, the blame would eventually fall on him. Compared to Benson's matter, Melissa's matter was not as serious in Klein's eyes. Melissa has always been very smart. After understanding the Beyonder world, it's not unimaginable for her to guess about my situation. If it were before, Klein would have hoped that his family could stay away from the Beyonder world. But after witnessing the Backland tragedy and the cold-bloodedness of the Lowen Kingdom's ruling class, he was more inclined to let Benson and Melissa become Beyonders and possess a certain degree of self-protection. After all, even if Avon, Captain Dunn, and Leonard were very attentive to his family, there would always be places they couldn't cover, and they might even be implicated because they were Beyonders. Can you get the Savant potion formula from Kathleen Gray? Since he had made up his mind, Klein decided to help Melissa. That's not difficult. Since you've made your decision, I'll help Melissa with it as soon as possible. It just so happens that the Horn family has some investment in scientific research, so she can also help me with some things. That's even better. Compared to the outside world, school is still a relatively simpler place. As for the Tamara family's matter, if there are any changes, please inform me in time. I will also investigate the Tamara family's affairs from the periphery. This was why Avon had to urgently inform Klein of these matters. Avon judged that after handing the short flute to Robert, he might not be able to intervene in subsequent matters. This was not conducive to him probing Robert's secrets, but if Klein investigated from the periphery, it would be much more convenient. Chapter 417, Uncertain Mist. After discussing matters concerning Benson and Melissa with Avon, Klein was not in a hurry to end their conversation. Instead, he began to talk about his activities over the past few days. I have already met Mr. Hanged Man and handed over all the intelligence I gathered on the Fasak Empire's Sunia Sea Navy, pirate generals, and kings to him. With his dual identity as both a pirate and an official, he is better suited to collect such information than I am. Next, I plan to first visit the Divine War ruins at the end of the Sunia Sea. I've heard it's the most likely place to find mermaids, and since my faceless Beyonder characteristic potion has been completely digested, it's time for me to advance. Although I can't catch up to you, I don't want to fall too far behind. Avon was not surprised by Klein's decision and said with a smile, "You should complete your advancement first. I still have at least a month before I set sail. Once you successfully advance, you'll be able to assist me better. By the way, the Divine War Ruins isn't a place just anyone can barge into. Have you found a ship to take you there?" Because Klein was setting sail 2 months earlier than in the original story, Avon was now curious whose ship he would be taking to the Divine War Ruins. "I will be taking Vice Admiral Iceberg's Golden Dream. She is also very curious about the Divine War Ruins and wants to use this opportunity to avoid the recent attention, as the rumors on the sea have become increasingly outrageous. By the way, have you heard the recent rumors on the sea about Vice Admiral Iceberg obtaining the key to Death's legacy?" "Of course, I know. The new army is about to set sail, and I've been paying close attention to the developments on the sea during this period." "What? Did you see that legendary key that only giants can use?" Avon knew about Vice Admiral Iceberg obtaining that key even earlier than Klein. When he received the relevant information, Avon's heart only contained 2 words, "Heh." Because by simply comparing it with the original text, one could see that Vice Admiral Iceberg obtained that key at least a month earlier. This meant that both the key to the Giant's Court and Grossel's travels were arranged by the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. This also indicated that Klein's existence was not a secret among the deities, especially those with special authority. Since Klein's existence was no secret, then Avon, who was so close to him, naturally couldn't hide from those deities. However, the God of Knowledge and Wisdom would rather go through such a lengthy process to invest in Klein, just like in the original story, than give Avon any investment or show him any consideration. Whenever he thought of this, Avon always felt a bit resentful. Avon had seen a similar attitude from the life counselor. If it weren't for Robert, it's likely that no matter how much effort Avon put in, the life counselor wouldn't want to bother with him. Why was Klein always so popular, while they always avoided him? Did the name, City of Calamity, containing the word, calamity, make it so unwelcome? Indeed, I saw that key. It really looks like something only giants could use. As soon as Klein saw the key, he recalled that son, Derek, had once mentioned that the City of Silver, where he resided, was near the legendary Giant's Court. A connection immediately sparked in his mind. He had asked Edwina Edwards if she was willing to sell it but received a price he couldn't afford at the moment. It was only today, meeting Avon above the gray fog, that he remembered Avon was a veritable tycoon. If he could persuade him to buy it, then he could borrow it in the future. So he actively steered the conversation towards the key, and sure enough, Avon became interested as soon as he heard about it. "Can you acquire that key? You haven't forgotten that Sun's City of Silver is near the Giant's Court, have you?" Although he didn't know how the future plot of Lord of the Mysteries would unfold, from the writing, this key must be crucial. In a novel, if a gun appears, that gun will eventually be fired. Moreover, there might be the endorsement of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom behind this key. Therefore, acquiring this key was a no-lose proposition for Avon. And there was another unspoken thought in Avon's mind. Although it seemed the God of Knowledge and Wisdom was unwilling to invest in him, he could take the opportunity to forcefully cling on. It made no sense to avoid an investor just because they didn't like you, like a young maiden afraid to meet people. If they didn't like you, you should appear before them more often. After all, what could they do to you? To borrow a line from a movie from his previous life, making money, it's not shameful. Klein hadn't expected things to be easier than he imagined. For a moment, he was stunned, but he quickly reacted and said, "Of course, I thought of that too. So I asked Vice Admiral Iceberg if she would be willing to transfer the key. Vice Admiral Iceberg doesn't value that key, but she also doesn't want to sell it cheaply. So she's asking for £8,000, and she won't accept bargaining." Upon hearing the price, Avon instinctively frowned, but then immediately relaxed. In the original story, Vice Admiral Iceberg sold it to Klein for £5,000, but that included the goodwill of Klein rescuing her from Grossel's travels. So, her current asking price of £8,000 wasn't a rip-off. Money was no longer an issue for Avon, so after hearing the quote, Avon said without hesitation, "I'll pay for this. Once I leave here, I'll immediately perform a sacrificial ritual. You acquire this key as quickly as possible. Be careful not to delay, as I've heard that more than one force is interested in this key." In the original story, it was Pirate General Blood, Senor, who coveted this key. Behind Senor stood the Rose School of Thought, which was currently under attack from Grisha. And behind the Rose School of Thought stood the Mother Tree of Desire, an evil god that all deities greatly feared, seemingly at the peak of the sequence, and even contemplating the gray fog. This indirectly underscored the importance of this key. Avon was very worried that something might go wrong due to interference from various forces. Alright, I'm on the Golden Dream right now. Once I get the money, I'll go directly to Vice Admiral Iceberg to make the transaction, and then give it to you through Mr. Fool. Although he didn't understand why Avon seemed eager, Klein didn't think much of it and readily agreed. No, don't give it to me. It's best if Mr. Fool keeps it. I have a feeling that key isn't so simple, and it might not be safe in my hands. I just don't know if Mr. Fool will agree. The City of Calamity cannot hold items. Any items sent into it will be captured by the City of Calamity. This is a characteristic of the City of Calamity and aligns well with the description of the Conqueror Authority on the Blasphemy Slate. The reason why the Beander characteristic of the War Bishop could be sent into it last time was because both belonged to the Hunter pathway. Klein frowned slightly, feeling that Avon was placing too much importance on this key, which was beyond his imagination. He even couldn't help but guess whether Avon knew some unknown secrets. However, Klein didn't have time to think much more. Instead, he quickly mobilized the power of the gray fog and made a slight reaction. This was Mr. Fool's divine kingdom. Avon's last sentence was clearly not for Klein but for Mr. Fool. If Mr. Fool didn't give a timely response, it would be too unreasonable. As the gray fog seemed to be blown by a strong wind, rolling and unfurling, Klein acted like a charlatan reading cracks on a tortoise shell, interpreting for Avon. Mr. Fool has agreed to your request. After obtaining that key, I will sacrifice it to Mr. Fool. When you need it, you can directly set up a bestowal ritual and pray to Mr. Fool for its bestowal. Avon, cooperating with Klein's act, also ceremoniously bowed towards the empty fool's seat at the head of the table, expressing his gratitude. After Avon left the gray fog, Klein did not immediately leave. Instead, he sat in the fool's position. After waiting for only a few minutes, he saw the sacrificial door opened by Avon. What was sacrificed were brand new banknotes, seemingly still smelling of ink, all in 10-pound denominations, a total of 8 stacks. After some effort to send the pounds into reality, Klein didn't delay. He immediately took the money and found Vice Admiral Iceberg to purchase the key from her. Edwina Edwards, dressed in a smart teacher's outfit, unhappily put down her teaching whip, instructed the crew to study by themselves, and then led Klein to her collection room. Every afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. is when I teach the crew. In the future, unless it's an emergency, don't look for me during this time. It was Klein's first time seeing a pirate who also had to teach classes. He had only heard about it from Danitz before, but this was the first time he had seen it. Although he was mentally prepared, he almost couldn't maintain his composure when he witnessed this scene. He only managed to maintain Gehrman Sparrow's persona, frowning slightly and asking in confusion, "I heard Danitz say that you all get time off when the ship docks." At this time, the Golden Dream was docked at a hidden port in the Rorstad archipelago and had not yet departed. Edwina Edwards exhaled lightly and said somewhat unhappily, "A few days ago, I organized an exam, and many of them failed. So, I cancelled this vacation and planned to have a makeup exam in a week." Klein's expression almost broke. In the end, he could only pray for Danitz in his heart, hoping he would pass the makeup exam smoothly. After handing the huge black key to Klein, Edwina Edwards didn't even bother to count the money Klein gave her. She looked at him with a longing expression and said, "I don't know why you want to buy this key. After all, I've tried everything and haven't found any useful clues. If you can uncover the secret behind it, I hope you can tell me a word or two." Klein took the heavy key, almost dropping it. He managed to steady himself with difficulty. Hearing Edwina Edwards' request, he pondered for a moment and said, "This key might be related to the legendary Giant's Court." Edwina Edwards' eyes gleamed with astonishing brilliance upon hearing this. She opened her mouth to ask for more details but quickly reacted, remaining silent, merely watching Klein slowly depart. So heavy. As soon as he entered his cabin, Klein placed the key he was holding on the bed and shook his arms, allowing his somewhat sore and numb arms to recover. I wonder how Edwina managed to pick up such a heavy key. She should be a reader pathway Beander, the potion shouldn't significantly boost physical attributes, right? Klein suspected that Edwina had used some kind of secret art to enhance her strength to pick up the key. After shaking his arms a few times, Klein set up the sacrificial ritual, sacrificing the key to the gray fog. Afterward, he walked 4 steps counterclockwise and entered the gray fog. Sitting on the high-backed chair in the Bronze Palace, Klein materialized paper and pen, and wrote down the content he wanted to divine. The place corresponding to this key. Holding the key, Klein leaned back in his chair and quickly fell into a dream. Soon, Klein saw a distorted, uncertain, translucent barrier in his dream. As the scene zoomed in, he saw a huge city seemingly enveloped in eternal twilight. The image rapidly magnified, and soon a blue-gray gate, over 30 meters high, adorned with many symbols and patterns, appeared. It had a dark, empty hole the size of an adult human fist, clearly the keyhole for the door. The scene shattered, and the dream ended. Klein opened his eyes. It really is related to the legendary Giant's Court. Is the translucent barrier I first saw the true creator's blockade of the forsaken land of the gods? Klein was not surprised that the key was related to the Giant's Court. Instead, he was more concerned about the true creator's blockade of the forsaken land of the gods. After all, this concerned the fate of so many people in the City of Silver. What does this key represent? The treasure of the ancient giant king? Or a suppressed evil god? After suppressing the many questions in his mind, Klein again materialized paper and pen and wrote. The person who will lead Benson onto the Beander pathway. Because Benson and Klein were blood relatives, Klein did not need a medium to divine matters related to Benson. After silently reciting the divination content, Klein once again fell into a dream. Soon, a very beautiful lady with rare deep gray pupils appeared in the dream, seemingly in prayer. Her attire was very peculiar, half intricate, half simple, half composed of various colors, half only pure black. What shocked Klein was that the lady, who was clearly not an angel, actually sensed Klein's gaze. She slowly raised her head and looked upwards. However, the moment her beautiful, profound eyes met Klein's gaze, they suddenly burst. And Klein's dream ended there. At the same time, the gray fog reacted violently, causing the Bronze Palace to shake. Klein was drenched in sweat, unable to control himself, constantly gasping for breath in his seat. Although it was only for an instant, Klein still saw the grayish-white mist that appeared the moment the lady's eyeballs burst. What was that? Chapter 418, Robert and the Uncertain Mist. Up until now, Klein had directly observed too many high-level existences through the gray fog. There were sealed artifacts like 008, which could only block and interfere with his secondary peeping, and there were also the true creator and eternal blazing sun, which caused him severe backlash, nearly making him lose control and suffer agonizing pain. However, only Avon's first ascent to the gray fog had caused such a violent reaction from the gray fog before this. The gray fog and the phantom of mysterious city on Avon violently collided, and in the end, neither could overcome the other, so both sides ceased their efforts. Does that lady also possess a high-level item similar to the gray fog and mysterious city? No, it doesn't look like it. Instead, it's more like the situation when I used the gray fog to cleanse the pollution from the werewolf Beander characteristic I obtained earlier. If she truly possessed an item of the same rank as the gray fog and mysterious city, then she wouldn't have been severely injured just now merely because I used the gray fog to divine her. If that's the case, is that lady from the Tamara family, like the werewolf of the Rose School of Thought, merely a person polluted by a high-ranking item? Because of the mysterious city on Avon, Klein had long lost the pride of having the gray fog as a cheat, as he was not the only one in this world. Divided more meticulously according to the 22 pathways, there are at least 8 other items in this world with the same rank as the gray fog. The mysterious city on Avon is one, and the mother tree of desire might also represent one. Is the item that polluted the Tamara lady also one of them? Due to his limited information, Klein could only draw such a vague conclusion and could not make any further guesses. But this single discovery already set off alarm bells in Klein's heart. The mother tree of desire discovering the existence of the gray fog, sending Jax to Backland to search for his traces, and almost capturing him, left too deep an impression on Klein. If that Tamara lady was indeed a demigod polluted by a high-level item similar to the gray fog, does that mean a malevolent god similar to the mother tree of desire has come knocking? The primordial moon, or the cosmic dark side? The target could be him, or it could be Avon, who bears the mysterious city. Thinking that Avon was still unprepared for this, and even speculated that the other party's target might be his older brother, Klein felt a sense of urgency. In the end, he decided to risk exposing his identity and transmit the scene he had just divined to Avon. However, when Klein tried to materialize the scene he had just dreamed of, he found himself unable to completely recreate the fleeting grayish-white mist he had seen in the lady's pupils. This phenomenon did not discourage Klein. He believed that as long as he gave Avon a little more hint, he should understand his meaning and take appropriate precautions. Moreover, this further strengthened Klein's previous conjecture, which was that the lady had been polluted by an item of the same level as the gray fog. Not long after projecting the materialized scene into the red star representing Avon, Klein saw Avon's prayer, thanking Mr. Fool for the revelation. In the prayer, Avon directly stated that he understood Mr. Fool's reminder and would prepare to deal with it. After Klein removed the scene, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief and then began to think about what other channels he could use to continue investigating the Tamara family. There were too few records of the Tamara family in official organizations, especially the branch that continued down the arbiter and lawyer pathways. Edwina Edwards is backed by the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, and the reader pathway's authority in mysticism seems to represent omniscience. Should I inquire about relevant information from her? Or should I ask Rhodes? This fellow can also detect the existence of the gray fog, but Rhodes's origin is also very suspicious. The lady approaching Benson greatly angered Klein, but it also made him vigilant. The mother tree of desire sending a demigod to his doorstep might not be an isolated incident in the future, which also meant that his previous plan to conceal Klein's identity and protect Benson and Melissa might be ruined. Now, Klein's heart was more anxious than ever. It was like sitting on a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment, yet he had no way to defuse it. This feeling was simply terrible. After finishing his prayer to the Fool and expressing his gratitude, Avon recalled the scene he had just witnessed. The lady in peculiar clothing suddenly looked up, and then her eyeballs directly exploded. This indicated two things: the lady had detected Klein's peeping for an unknown reason. And after she detected Klein's peeping, and even directly looked at the gray fog, she did not lose control. She merely avoided the most terrifying loss of control at the minor cost of her two eyeballs exploding. At the same time, under the scrutiny boosted by the gray fog, no abnormalities were visible on the lady, which in itself indicated a problem. Klein transmitting this scene to him meant that Klein might have seen the source of the matter, and the absence of any abnormality meant that Klein was unable to construct a complete scene. All signs indicated that when Klein was peeping at that Tamara lady, there was interference from a power of the same level. Avon naturally understood what Klein could think of, and he even directly targeted the items at the peak of the arbiter and lawyer pathways. However, regarding information in this area, since the latter half of the Lord of the Mysteries was never declassified, he didn't know much more than Klein. Avon also understood Klein's intention in transmitting this scene to him. He was worried that Avon would also be targeted by a malevolent god. Although Avon couldn't deny the possibility, his intuition still told him that the lady's target was Robert, not himself. What should I do? Avon looked at the short flute in his hand, feeling very conflicted. After some thought, Avon had the Aemon clone in his left hand spit out the blasphemy card sealed with the aura of the City of Calamity. Then, holding the blasphemy card in one hand and the mysterious short flute in the other, he carefully allowed the two to make contact. As Avon expected, the short flute, which had previously shown no reaction no matter what, was immediately stimulated and transformed into an exceptionally dense, yet unscattering, grayish-white mist. When Avon removed the blasphemy card, the dense grayish-white mist automatically reverted to the unremarkable short flute it had been a moment ago, but a considerable amount of the City of Calamity's aura preserved within the blasphemy card was consumed. This short flute is indeed not that simple. It's not formed by the aura of a high-level item, it's more like the phantom of the mysterious city on me, a direct passage to that high-level item. After becoming a demigod, Avon's mastery over the City of Calamity further strengthened, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of its current state. Simply put, he did indeed have authority over the City of Calamity, but the power he could mobilize was actually not much. The entire City of Calamity seemed to be suppressed by an unknown seal. Therefore, the City of Calamity he entered during meditation was actually a projection of the true City of Calamity, and he could only mobilize the power that seeped through the seal of the true City of Calamity. And at this moment, the feeling the short flute gave Avon could not be explained by mere pollution, it was more like the projection on his body. Avon could probably completely destroy this short flute with all his might, but the cost might be the complete consumption of the power projected by the City of Calamity through the seal, meaning he might temporarily lose control over the City of Calamity, which Avon absolutely could not accept. But if this short flute wasn't destroyed, then how should it be handled? Previously, Avon wanted to use this short flute to indirectly probe Robert's secret, but now he dared not do so. Just as Avon restrained Beyonders of the Hunter and Assassin pathways, this short flute might restrain Beyonders of the Arbiter pathway. Even though this short flute seemed to show no reaction now, it might be different in front of Robert. He wasn't so reckless as to joke with Robert's safety without knowing the danger level. However, at the same time, Avon thought of another question: what exactly did the person who sent the short flute to him want to do? First, from the scene transmitted by Klein, it could be seen that the lady could absolutely not be the owner of that grayish-white mist, she was merely a polluted person. Therefore, her actions were not her own logic, but the logic of that unknown high-level item, meaning she was merely a proxy. This short flute, to some extent, was a switch that might allow one to come into contact with that high-level item. Just as I can control the authority of the City of Calamity through its phantom. So, if this short flute truly fell into Robert's hands, Robert might be able to control the power behind the short flute through it. Of course, this was only the most optimistic guess. In fact, it was more likely that this short flute was bait, and the item it represented had already become active but hadn't truly come alive, so it needed to find a host, thus finding Robert. Or perhaps it had indeed fully activated but was dissatisfied with its current proxy and wanted to find a new one, etc. Avon shook his head, feeling that various conjectures were possible, making it difficult to make a judgment. Forget it, I'm not a Beyander of the Arbiter and Lawyer pathways. Any guess is like looking at flowers in a fog, I can't figure out the reason. I should inform Robert about this and let him evaluate it himself. Avon was unwilling to bring this short flute before Robert and harm him, nor was he willing to let Robert miss a potential opportunity, so he could only let Robert make his own decision. Avon quickly wrote a letter, recounting how the short flute came into his possession, basically telling everything he could, except for matters concerning the gray fog and the City of Calamity. For places he couldn't explain, he used the Evernight Goddess as a shield. After writing the letter, Avon checked it from beginning to end. Feeling that there were no problems, he went directly to the street, found a random newsboy, tore a £1 banknote in front of him, handed him half of the banknote, and then waved the other half in front of him before smiling and saying, "Within 2 hours, deliver this letter to the security office of the Parliament building, and let the security personnel see the words I wrote on the envelope. Then, hand them the letter, and you can come get this half, understood?" The newsboy, whose face was relatively clean, looked at the half banknote dangling in Avon's hand, then at the banknote in his own hand, swallowed deeply, gritted his teeth, and said, "You go first, I only need an hour to run to the Parliament building." With that, he took the envelope from Avon's hand and ran towards the Parliament building. Watching the newsboy's receding figure, Avon smiled. His demoness's intuition told him that this newsboy would honestly deliver his letter to Robert. In fact, after Robert became a Chaos Hunter, he already had his own honorific name, but he never used it and rarely told others. As the price for joining George III's inner circle, Robert had to recite George III's honorific name and become his devotee upon entering the core circle, outwardly entrusting his fate to George III. This also meant that anyone who recited Robert's honorific name could potentially be discovered by George III, and even be locked onto by him simultaneously. And this would not only fail to keep any secrets but would also directly expose the fact that Robert had already advanced to Sequence 3 Chaos Hunter. It should be known that in George III's eyes, Robert had always been an imperative mage with the Chaos Hunter magic potion formula in his possession. Therefore, Robert had never appeared on George III's list of people to eliminate, which included Katerina Pell and Panadia. Moreover, even if Robert's advancement could be glossed over, and George III didn't pursue how Robert had secretly advanced, Avon would still not escape suspicion. Because in George III's eyes, Avon was a layer of insurance for his control over Robert, similar to the relationship between a supervising general and a general. The supervising general not only knew that the general was secretly causing trouble but also failed to report it. Not reporting it was one thing, but then secretly colluding with the general, no emperor could tolerate that. Therefore, reciting Robert's honorific name for communication was a hugely risky act for both Robert and Avon, so they had never used this method to contact each other. The reason Robert, despite knowing this risk, still told Avon his honorific name was to allow Avon to call for help in the most urgent situations. This could also be said to be the last means of contact between Robert and Avon. After returning to the apartment, Avon sat on the large sofa in the living room, closing his eyes to rest, waiting for Robert's reply. In less than an hour, Avon's heart stirred. He opened his eyes and found Robert, dressed in a sharp suit, had appeared directly in the living room. And the short flute in Avon's hand directly left his palm and flew towards Robert, like a young swallow returning to its nest. Chapter 419, Ghost Empire. Just as the flute flew towards Robert, Avon felt a strong sense of unease, as if a great disaster was about to strike, and calamity was imminent. The red light on his body suddenly appeared, and the phantom of the city of calamity, like a background, emerged as if it had come alive. At the same time, a similar projection appeared on Robert's body. The layers of projections emitted a cyan light, like layers of sky. Each layer of sky displayed magnificent buildings, grand and awe-inspiring, and that was precisely the target the gray-white mist, transformed from the flute, was flying towards. Feeling the presence of the gray-white mist, those tall and towering palaces also burst forth with brilliant light, seemingly echoing it from afar, yet also seemingly repelling it. But just as the gray-white mist was about to arrive, Robert suddenly reached out and clutched the invisible mist in his hand, preventing it from breaking free. The gray-white mist, contrary to Avon's imagination, showed no sign of struggle. It obediently transformed back into a flute, lying quietly in Robert's hand. Robert looked at the flute in his hand, examined it up and down, then flipped his hand, and the flute disappeared, hidden somewhere. The phantom behind him also vanished silently. Then Robert looked at the still-present phantom of the city of calamity behind Avon and said with a smile, "Is this your secret? The ultimate symbol of the hunter and demoness pathways?" Upon hearing this, Avon immediately understood that Robert's secret was similar to his own, and that he had long suspected the city of calamity on him. "I should have realized it sooner. You dared to actively chant George III's honorific name without worrying about being restricted by him. That must mean you've gained recognition from a higher-level entity." Robert and Avon looked at each other, saying nothing, but gradually they both started to smile, and their laughter grew louder and louder. After a long while, the two stopped laughing, took their seats, and then Avon spoke first. "Although you hid it very well, I shouldn't have been so slow to realize the truth until now. Was this your doing?" Upon discovering that Robert possessed something on the same level as himself, Avon's first reaction was not excitement at discovering a secret, but rather confusion about his own tardiness. Clearly, Robert's previous actions had many unusual aspects. For example, his confident chanting of George III's honorific name, without any worry of being controlled by him. Another example was how Robert managed to kill Katerina Pell without leaving any trace for Augustus I and George III, who had the home advantage, to discover. However, Avon had always overlooked the possibility that Robert might possess something similar to the City of Calamity, never even considering it. Since he had been exposed, Robert had nothing left to hide. He nodded in direct admission and then said with a smile, "I used this authority to establish a rule. Everyone would subconsciously overlook the suspicious points about me. This was the first rule I formulated after becoming a Beander and gaining this authority, after careful consideration." Avon put himself in Robert's shoes and thought about it. He felt that if he had similar authority, his first reaction would also be to hide himself, to hide completely. This is almost a psychological invisibility at the rule level. In my previous life's language, it should be called cognitive bias. It's just that my cheat is called the City of Calamity. I wonder what his cheat is called. What can that city on you bring you? After answering Avon's question, Robert naturally posed his own question. It allows me to advance through two pathways simultaneously and pre-borrow some abilities from the previous sequence. Since Robert had told him his secret, Avon could no longer hide anything. Robert was visibly surprised upon hearing this, sitting up straight, his mouth slightly agape, looking at Avon opposite him in disbelief. Avon, despite the internal shame, transformed into the appearance of Alice. As Avon transformed, Robert's expression became increasingly complex. His fingers trembled slightly, a rare sight, and he seemed to want to speak but held back. Seeing Robert in this state, Avon's internal shame faded considerably, and a playful mood arose. He rested his chin on his hand, tilted his head, and said sweetly, "How is it? Aren't you happy to have such a beautiful younger sister, big brother?" Cough, cough, cough. To suppress the strange feeling in his heart, Robert tactically picked up his water glass to drink, but was immediately choked by Avon's words. The water in the glass spilled onto his trousers, leaving him flustered for a moment. Avon, seeing this, burst out laughing, stamping his feet and beating his chest, almost crying from laughter. But Avon knew his limits and at the same time changed back to his original appearance. Robert, at this point, treated the water stains on his body as dirt and promptly punished them away, resuming his upright posture. "I should have realized it sooner. You actively orchestrated the Great Riot and killed Despair Nightingale, not just to cause trouble for George III, but probably because you coveted her Beander characteristic." Once he knew the changes that City brought to Avon, Robert could also clearly see Avon's considerations and goals in many previous matters. "Does the Evernight Goddess know about the existence of that city on you?" This was the question Robert most wanted to know now, because Avon had always claimed to be a favored one of the Evernight Goddess, and this involved the attitude of a deity. "She knows. Otherwise, how could the goddess possibly let me be her favored one? As for whether the goddess knows about that palace on you, to be honest, I'm not very clear either. According to my own guess, she should know. I even suspect that the god of storms knows too." Avon's conjecture that the Evernight Goddess knew Robert's secret was mainly because he also understood today why Adam was so wary of Robert. And since Adam could discover Robert's existence, how could the Evernight Goddess, also an old player, not know? Robert was not disappointed by this answer. At least it explained his long-standing question, what the Evernight Goddess saw in Avon that made her choose him as a favored one when he was still a low-sequence Beander. And it confirmed why the god of storms had strongly demanded his conversion. Robert had always suspected that the god of storms could discover his secret, and today he had indirectly received confirmation from Avon. Since the deities can discover the secret on me, then they should also know that George III and I are irreconcilable. What do you think their attitude towards George III and me is? This was another matter Robert was very concerned about, as it involved the unfolding of their subsequent plans. Avon had also considered this point long ago. "We obtained that Black Emperor blasphemy card, so we can confirm that Emperor Rosal's adventure back then indeed succeeded. He became a true Black Emperor. The Black Emperor's advancement ritual is not a secret among deities, so his advancement could not be hidden from their eyes. During this process, the 7 deities definitely had the ability to stop him, but ultimately they did not, only killing him after he became a mad Black Emperor. This indicates that the 7 deities held an open, even very supportive, attitude towards the birth of the Black Emperor. The specific reasons are unknown. It's just that they might prefer someone from their own side to become the Black Emperor. So, the 7 deities should be observing George III's advancement with cold eyes, or even tacitly approving it. And the god of storms' clear attempt to win you over, to be honest, is indeed puzzling. If he truly supported George III, then what he should have done most was to warn George III about your threat. So I think the god of storms might not like George III very much either. Coupled with the fact that you obtained that palace, he can only remain neutral in the struggle between you and George III. Avon had never quite understood why the god of storms and the Evernight Goddess didn't fully support George III. After all, if George III became the Black Emperor, regardless of their personal relationship, as long as George III successfully advanced to Black Emperor, their natural stance would very naturally bring them together, forming a solid three-deity alliance with the LotM kingdom as the bond. If the Evernight goddess disliked George III, perhaps with a bias due to Klein, then why would the god of storms? Now, knowing Robert's secret, Avon began to somewhat understand the god of storms' position. Robert's recognition by that palace clearly allowed him to go further on the same path, giving the god of storms a reason to bet on him. However, constrained by George III already being close to the end of his path to becoming the Black Emperor, he could only adopt a neutral stance for now. Robert nodded, largely agreeing with Avon's analysis, then said, "As for the Evernight goddess's stance, I feel she is more likely to support my struggle with George III. Otherwise, she could have maintained the same neutral stance as the god of storms, instead of directly taking you as her favored one. She might value the bloodline on us, knowing that we absolutely cannot stand with the god of combat, while George III's position is uncertain." Speaking of this, Robert couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, because the situation was much better than he had previously imagined. Before this, the best outcome he had envisioned was actually the deities observing his and George III's struggle with cold eyes, not interfering. Now, being able to confirm the support of a deity for him was an even better result. It's possible. After all, once George III becomes the Black Emperor, he will become a player, and his stance in the goddess's struggle with the god of combat cannot be guaranteed. Neither Robert nor Avon paid attention to the god of steam and machinery. After all, this was the LotM kingdom, not the Intis Republic. As a later deity, a deity who only advanced in the fourth epoch, the god of steam and machinery's stance was more likely to sway with the wind, helping whoever won. After discussing the grand narrative, Robert turned his attention back to Avon himself. "How did you get that city's recognition? Was it in Tingen or Backland?" "In Tingen, around the end of June this year, I was targeted by both the Demonist sect and Theosophy order. I was forced to drink the assassin potion, but unexpectedly I received the city's protection. Then I discovered that I could advance through two pathways simultaneously." Now, besides his transmigration, Avon had nothing left to hide from Robert, so he simply explained everything clearly. "It was still due to my negligence." Robert still couldn't fully accept the fact that his younger brother could turn into a younger sister. After listening to Avon's account, he looked full of self-reproach. However, Avon had no intention of blaming Robert. After all, if it weren't for Robert's negligence and the original body not committing suicide, he wouldn't have been able to come to this colorful world. "So, the Fasak princess who caused so much trouble for all parties was you in disguise." Robert quickly buried his guilt towards Avon in his heart and said with a smile, "That's right. When I found out I could transform into a woman, I thought of this plan. And Petrov Andrei's surrender created an excellent condition for me. If I can truly solidify this princess identity, it will play an unexpectedly huge role in our future actions against the Einhorn family." Robert instantly grasped Avon's idea, thought about it for a moment, and felt that it was indeed a very worthwhile plan to implement. "No wonder you kept pushing me to inform George III about Ahomatova Einhorn's defection to us. You wanted to use LotM's reaction to gain credit and increase the value of the so-called Alice, didn't you? You're playing quite the game." Avon's series of actions essentially involved using his special position to transmit information to both sides, reap benefits from both, and ultimately betray both parties. Avon chuckled, not bothering to explain, but instead looking very proud. "I've basically gained the trust of the Fasak Empire now. Next, I'm going to plan to eliminate Maxim, and then directly contact Ahomatova Einhorn. Although you have the protection of that city, you still need to be careful, don't be careless." Robert didn't understand the function of the City of Calamity, so he could only offer a reminder. Avon, however, was very confident, because he had already experimented on another weather warlock, so he was sure he wouldn't be exposed in front of Ahomatova Einhorn. "You don't need to worry about me." "Oh, and how did you get that palace?" Robert had just said that the first rule he established after becoming a Beander was to hide himself. This also indicated that he, too, obtained that palace after becoming a Beander. Such a similarity even made Avon secretly wonder if Robert was also a transmigrator like himself. "I accidentally eliminated an arbiter from the Truncest family and, after consuming his Beander characteristic, I obtained this palace." Since Avon had shared his experience with him, Robert was not stingy about sharing a bit of his own story. It was precisely by eliminating that arbiter that I found the legendary Ghost Empire. Chapter 420 The Earth Mother's State. You mean the Phantom Empire? The treasure of the Trensost Empire rumored on the sea. Avon had long known that the treasures rumored on the sea were not so simple, they must have a certain origin. The Fountain of Youth was an example, even though it was a trap. So, Avon had even thought about dedicating some effort to finding them after going out to sea. After all, everyone has the adolescent fantasy of sailing the sea, breaking through waves, and searching for treasure. He just hadn't expected one of those treasures to be gone before he even set out. Yes, it's that mysterious ship rumored to contain all the treasures of the Trensost Empire. I obtained this, Night Emperor's pocket watch, from it. Saying this, Robert once again displayed his most prized possession. What else was on it? There must have been more than just this sealed artifact, right? The 9-year compulsory education from his previous life had a profound impact on Avon, making him highly value the exploration of history. Therefore, Avon was very interested in the mystery of the Night Emperor's demise. A god who unified the North Continent and received the support of the 7 gods had mysteriously and silently died. And after the Night Emperor's mysterious demise, the Trensost Empire directly disintegrated, leading to the current situation where the North Continent is still divided among various powers. This historical event also caused countless historians to beat their chests and sigh with regret. Consequently, the mystery of the Night Emperor's demise was listed by historians as the top of the 4th epoc's 10 greatest historical mysteries, prompting countless people to trace its origins and sustaining numerous historians and beyonders of high sequence who understood the Beyonder world generally knew about the War of the 4 Emperors in the 4th epoch, which was truly a melee of 4 gods, and the Night Emperor was the ultimate winner. Such a winner, who had the last laugh, died mysteriously and unexpectedly, which aroused the curiosity of countless high-sequence demigods and even kings of angels. More than one demigod even hoped to unravel this secret, allowing them to fully digest their potion. But unfortunately, over 1,000 years have passed, and to this day, the Night Emperor's death remains an unsolved mystery. So, upon hearing that Robert had been aboard the legendary Phantom Empire, Avon's curiosity was thoroughly ignited. It's said I went aboard, but it can't really be considered truly going aboard. I boarded the Phantom Empire in a dream one night while on my way back to Backland from the southern continent, making a detour to the Sunia Sea. In a dream. This was an unexpected answer for Avon, but considering that the Phantom Empire had not been captured for so many years, it must be very special, so he found it perfectly reasonable. Yes, in a dream. I felt at the time that I hadn't found the complete key to that large ship. It was simply because my Beyonder characteristic contained the mark of Truncest that the large ship appeared and gave me this pocket watch. Even now, recalling the scene from that dream, Robert still felt it was very unreal. So, have you found that key now? Is it the flute from just now? Even though he now knew the secret about Robert, he was still utterly confused by the flute that had just been put away, not understanding its significance. I don't know. I'll find an opportunity to verify it, but I don't think it is. Robert spoke very frankly, but it left Avon bewildered. What exactly does that flute represent? I feel it's not the same kind of thing as the palace you control. And what exactly does the Tamara family mean? What do they intend to do by sending that flute to you? How should I put it? The palace I control and the object represented by that flute are like 2 adjacent pathways, sharing similarities and commonalities, but also having contradictions and oppositions. Robert's analogy was simple, but it left Avon dumbfounded. Because in his understanding, the City of Calamity, the Grey Fog, and the palace Robert controlled were all transcendent sequence items. And according to the division of the 22 pathways, there should only be 9 such items, and they should never be adjacent. But Robert was now saying that the power behind that flute was indeed at a level above sequence, yet it was adjacent to that unknown palace, which truly challenged Avon's current understanding. Although it sounds incredible, that is the truth. And I can even feel that the power behind this flute has no corresponding counterpart in the other 20 pathways, which means this power isn't in the existing Beyonder world system at all. Robert spoke of his feelings in detail, and his expression was very serious, clearly reminding Avon of the gravity of the matter. And Avon did indeed realize how important this matter was, because it meant that the currently known Beander system had a loophole, and the foundation of mysticism was shaken. This at least proved that there were not just 22 Beander pathways in the world, but more. But if there were other Beander pathways, where were they all? Almost instantly, Avon thought of the only answer, the cosmos. Thinking of this, Avon couldn't help but look at the apartment's French window, and through the tinted glass, he saw the red moon already appearing on the horizon. Through my classmate's channel, I learned that Emperor Rosal had once ascended the red moon in his later years, and his drastic change in personality also began at that time. When I learned this news, the first thing I thought of was that evil god, the primordial moon, who, like the mother tree of desire, was rejected and hated by other gods. I told you before that I am now Mr. Z of the Aurora Order, so I can also understand the movements of the true creator. Currently, the Aurora Order is mobilizing troops in the southern continent against the Rose School of Thought controlled by the Mother Tree of Desire. From all aggregated intelligence, this evil god should already be above sequence. So, would the primordial moon, who is equally famous, also be in existence above sequence? I used to think that the positions occupied by the Mother Tree of Desire and the primordial moon were two of those 9 highest positions. But now it seems more likely that the positions they occupy are ones we don't know about, which is to say, they are outsiders. Speaking of this, Avon remembered the Mother Tree of Desire sending Jax to find Klein, which further solidified his judgment. This planet was a hunting ground, with terrifying alien existences wanting to hunt suitable prey for themselves, but they were stopped from entering due to unknown reasons. And this unknown reason, Avon guessed, might be related to the 7 gods no longer interfering in the world since the 5th epoch. It wasn't that they didn't want to interfere in the world, but that they were already unable to interfere in the world, they were trapped by external enemies. After reaching this conclusion, Avon felt somewhat relieved. He was a person who believed in the inherent evil of human nature, and simply didn't believe that the 7 gods not interfering in the world was because God loves the world or didn't want the wars between gods to destroy humanity. The explanation that the 7 gods were trapped by external enemies seemed more credible to Avon. Moreover, this conjecture could also explain another long-standing question Avon had. Why were most of the 7 gods sworn enemies, yet they could accept a sacred covenant that restricted themselves? If there was an external force influencing them, then everything made sense. What Avon could think of, Robert could also think of, and even think a layer deeper. This might also be related to the doomsday recorded in the Holy Scriptures of various major churches. Avon was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, then nodded in agreement. This might also explain why the Evernight goddess was so eager to release 008. It also shows who holds the strings behind Ask. Time is of the essence. Avon once again used this opportunity to hint to Robert about the Evernight goddess's transaction with Adam. And at this sensitive moment, Robert obviously understood the information Avon provided, his expression becoming more serious as he pondered how to deal with the future full of variables. After a long while, Robert finally came to his senses and said with a smile, "These matters are too far from us right now. We would have to at least become so-called kings of angels to even be qualified to consider and intervene. So, thinking too much now is useless. Let's just proceed step by step with our own affairs. To use a quote from Emperor Rosal, if the sky falls, there's a tall one to hold it up. You have the ability to become Alice and possess that city. You must have already set your sights on the Demonist sect and Theosophy order, right? How is the progress now? Progress with Theosophy order is good, I already have captured high sequence members. Progress with the Demonist sect is a bit slow. And the reason for the slow progress, besides the Augustus family currently having a cooperative relationship with the Demonist sect, making it difficult for me to act, is also because I want to target their transaction. That conqueror Beander characteristic in the hands of the Augustus family. Yes, this is the conqueror Beander characteristic I'm most likely to obtain right now, so I don't want to tip them off and waste this good opportunity." Robert understood but still couldn't help but admonish. Besides that, you must also be careful of the primordial demoness. A god who managed to survive the Pale disaster at the end of the 4th epoch, despite being targeted by the 7 gods collectively, cannot be underestimated. Compared to the arbiter and lawyer pathways having no corresponding gods, the situation Avon faced was even more difficult. After all, although a god and a king of angels are just one step away, it is a qualitative difference. Robert felt it was very difficult just by putting himself in Avon's shoes. Avon heard the concern in Robert's words, felt very touched, and said with a smile, "I understand, you don't have to worry about me. Don't forget, I still have Triss as a trump card. I think this is the biggest flaw the primordial demoness inadvertently revealed." From Tingen onwards, Avon had been scheming against Triss, precisely to target the primordial demoness. This was a conspirer's long-term preparation. It's good that you have confidence, but you still need to be extremely careful. Pray to the goddess often and seek her protection. Robert knew a lot about the Evernight goddess's history, so he had more confidence in her than in the god of storms. It was just a pity that he could only convert. By the way, how do you plan to deal with the Tamara family? Because there were so many secrets discovered today, the initial focus had been overlooked. Avon thought of this and quickly pulled the conversation back. The Tamara family's intentions are unclear, it could be goodwill, or it could be malice. But whether it's goodwill or malice, they will definitely take action next. So the best way is to wait for them and try to catch their tail next time. Avon nodded in agreement with Robert's view, but quickly frowned and asked, "Do you think the Tamara family will merge with the Augustus family and expose our affairs?" "Probably not. No matter why they sent this flute, as long as they don't want to submit to the Augustus family, they won't join forces with them. And don't forget, if the power behind that flute truly comes from the cosmos, as we suspect, then George III would absolutely not dare to approach them, unless he wants to become a second bound god." Once it was guessed that the mother tree of desire might come from the cosmos, the history of the Rose school of thought became clear. The bound god was ensnared by a higher level power than himself. Speaking of the bound god, Avon suddenly thought of the criminal pathway adjacent to the prisoner pathway, and then thought of the abyss at the very top of the criminal pathway, saying with some uncertainty, "If the mother tree of desire is truly an existence above sequence from the cosmos, and its infiltration of the bound god was to obtain its prey, which is the topmost item of the prisoner and criminal pathways, then would it let go of the lurking cosmic dark side? And don't you think that since the rise of the Nos family, one of the three great devil families, the frequency of devil activities in the world has actually decreased? The reason why that Desire Lantern couldn't be caught last month was precisely because the 7 god churches had very little experience dealing with Desire Lanterns, wasn't it?" Robert pondered for a moment, then said, "It's true. After the 5th epoch, the frequency of devil activities has indeed decreased too much, even less than that of other hidden organizations. If this is really due to the mother tree of desire, then it's truly terrifying. If the mother tree of desire is already so terrifying, then what about the primordial moon, who is equally famous?" Robert and Avon looked at each other, both seeing the horror in the other's eyes. They both almost simultaneously thought of a terrifying possibility: is the Earth Mother truly the Earth Mother? From the primordial moon's influence on the sanguine, the primordial moon's goal is clearly the plantar pathway and the moon pathway. Since the mother tree of desire can corrupt and control the bound god, then the primordial moon influencing the Earth Mother is not a difficult thing to imagine. Especially since Robert and Avon both knew that the Church of the Earth Mother had several very special systems of God's Chosen and God's Grace. These two systems seemed as if the Earth Mother was actively creating divisions within her own church, which was very strange. Now, looking back at it, it felt like an early replica of the Rose school of thought. For a while, neither Robert nor Avon spoke, and the entire apartment was plunged into an eerie silence. Still, the same old saying applies: this isn't something we should be worrying about. We should just focus on doing our own things. You don't need to worry about the Tamara family either, just keep an eye on whether they continue to look for your friend's brother. Your most urgent task now is to deal with the Homitova Einhorn's matter and prepare for your sea voyage. Because the speculation about the Earth Mother was too astonishing, Robert and Avon found it difficult to delve deeper and could only let it go. Still, the same old saying applied: if the sky falls, someone taller will hold it up. It wasn't yet time for 2 demigods, who weren't even angels, to worry. I understand. I won't delve deeper into this matter. As for the Tamara family, I previously established a connection with the Abraham family, and the Tamara family had deep marital ties with them in the 4th epoch. They should have some understanding of their situation, so I can help you inquire about it from that angle. Avon even regretted exploring the secrets related to Lilith at this moment. In his heart, how to improve his strength and how to launch a counterattack against the Einhorn family were the top priorities, ranking first. Everything else could be temporarily set aside. The reason he had always investigated various secrets was merely to create leverage for himself. Essentially, it was still for his own advancement. If the secrets he sought were not conducive to his advancement and would drag him into troubled waters, then Avon would have no interest in exploring them, and would even avoid them. Alright, if there's any important news, remember to notify me in time. Oh, right, I already reported to George III yesterday about someone from the Einhorn family approaching me. You should pay attention to this. Robert exposing Maxim's matter to George III was something he and Avon had discussed long ago. It was to take advantage of this opportunity to further solidify George III's trust and, at the same time, use it to file a record of the incident. As long as it was on record with George III, then no matter what actions Robert and Avon took against the Einhorn family next, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. In that case, I also need to report the relevant matters to Duchess Georgina. Otherwise, if I delay reporting, my standing as a supervising general in their eyes will be greatly diminished. At this point, Robert had completely put his trust in Avon, so he didn't ask how Avon would handle things next. He simply said, I still have matters at Parliament, so I won't stay long. In short, proceed with caution. If there's anything you need me to intervene in, just let me know in advance. After speaking, Robert stood up, took a step, as if disregarding the laws of physics, and instantly appeared several kilometers away. With a few more steps, he left Sherwood Borough. After seeing Robert off, Avon didn't linger either. Instead, he made his way to a certain place through the omnipresent glass and mirrors. Duchess Georgina was scheduled to meet him tonight. Avon had initially thought it was about Triss, but now it seemed more likely to be about Maxim. If that were the case, Avon couldn't be negligent and had to be fully alert to deal with it. A landmark building in Backland, a towering Gothic clock tower. This was the national symbol built after the establishment of the LotM Kingdom, the Clock of Order. Under the red moon's illumination, there was a large shadow behind the clock tower. At this moment, a graceful figure with a tall stature stood in the shadows. This was none other than the LotM Kingdom's only Duchess, Duchess Georgina. She stood at the highest point, her gaze unfocused as she scrutinized Backland below, as if searching for something. What's so urgent that you called me here? Don't tell me you missed me after not seeing me for a few days. Just then, on the other side of the Big Ben, a humanoid flame suddenly appeared. The temperature of the flame was so high that even the surrounding air seemed to be burned into a void. Duchess Georgina turned her head, looking at the gradually appearing figure, secretly feeling surprised. Because it wasn't that she hadn't encountered an iron-blooded knight. In fact, before she came to Backland, her main opponents were the Einhorn family's iron-blooded knight. But she had never felt such high-temperature flames from that iron-blooded knight. This sealed artifact, after turning into a human, can still display extraordinary strength. It truly cannot be underestimated. Although Duchess Georgina constantly updated her assessment of Avon's strength in her heart, she never had a good impression of Avon, especially since Avon didn't seem to take her, the newly promoted Chaos Hunter, seriously at all, always speaking rudely when they met. If it weren't for Avon's current extremely important position, being a chess piece highly valued by George III, she would have long since given in to her temper and directly killed Avon. Duchess Georgina ignored Avon's teasing directly and said coldly, "The mission His Majesty gave you is to keep a close eye on everything around Robert Horn and report any abnormalities in time. But it seems you've forgotten your mission. Don't forget, since we can let you be reborn as a human from a sealed artifact, we can also turn you back into a sealed artifact." Facing Duchess Georgina's already very severe reprimand, Avon showed no reaction at all. Even his playful smile didn't change. Instead, he said indifferently, "I thought it was something serious. Is it about the Einhorn family preparing to re-establish contact with Robert Horn?" Single quote. Duchess Georgina's expression stiffened, her eyes instantly becoming exceptionally sharp. She stared intently at Avon and said word by word, "You know. You actually know. Since you knew about this, why didn't you report it in time?" Duchess Georgina was extremely annoyed. Avon, despite knowing about this matter, didn't report it to her, causing her to be called in by George III today and scolded without her knowing. This concerned a major issue of her leadership and also George III's trust in her. If Avon didn't explain clearly, she wouldn't mind giving Avon an unforgettable lesson today. Don't look at her as a Sequence 3 demigod now. As George III's current spokesperson, she holds a Grade 0 sealed artifact, just like her predecessor, Prince Grove. I didn't report it because I wanted to see if Robert Horn would engage in deeper contact with them. Now it seems he has been trained by you. He actually ran to you to confess everything so quickly. He's quite a coward. Do you think I still need to monitor him in the future? Robert's performance this time indeed made George III very satisfied and surprised. He didn't expect Robert to truly be loyal to this extent. Even someone with deep hatred would usually try to make contact first before weighing whether to report it. But Robert, unexpectedly, reported it directly as soon as the Einhorn family had the idea of contacting him. But emperors are all suspicious. George III had Duchess Georgina meet Avon tonight precisely to indirectly verify Robert's loyalty. George III had always suspected his subordinates' loyalty because of their dishonesty. This time, however, it was because his subordinate was too honest that he suspected his loyalty, which was a first. This subtle situation made George III himself feel a bit amused. Whether you need to monitor him or not is not something you should be considering. You'd best clarify everything you know and let us believe that you are still reliable. Duchess Georgina narrowed her eyes, saying with a murderous expression, as if ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. Seeing this, Avon pouted, not continuing to tease her. Instead, he offered the explanation he had prepared. Actually, at the same time Robert was approached, the Einhorn family also sent someone to contact me. It's just that they thought I was, at most, a Sequence 5 feet harvester, now, so they didn't send a demigod to approach me. Demigod? You mean the one who approached Robert Horn was actually a demigod? Duchess Georgina seized on the key phrase and immediately retorted. Because Robert only mentioned that the Einhorn family was sending people to approach him, wanting to turn him, but didn't mention Maxim's existence, neither George III nor Duchess Georgina knew that he was behind all this. In their eyes, the Einhorn family sending people to contact Robert was also a high-risk matter, and coupled with Bach Einhorn's capture in the Lowen Kingdom, it was natural for them to send minor figures to approach Robert in the early stages. Of course, if this matter were true, it would also indirectly confirm Robert's loyalty. After all, Robert reported directly to George III even before the person behind it showed their face. If this isn't loyalty, then what is loyalty? This is why I said Robert Horn has been domesticated by you. A normal person, knowing that the Einhorn family wants to re-establish contact with him, should first feign compliance, gain their trust, and seize the initiative. Then, they could either capture them in one fell swoop or extract some valuable information. Unlike now, knowing nothing, just eager to show loyalty to you, he rushed to report it prematurely, completely wasting such a great opportunity to gain benefits. Avon's tone was filled with contempt for Robert, as if he greatly looked down on Robert's actions. Regarding Avon's contempt, Duchess Georgina had a different view. In her opinion, Robert's approach was not only not foolish but actually very clever. The Horn family was essentially the Einhorn family. As long as this blood relationship existed, the Horn family itself was under suspicion. Not only did Ahomatova Einhorn believe that the Horn family could be swayed, but some within the Augustus family also thought the Horn family might betray them. The so-called thousand-year feud was not very convincing under the influence of practical interests. So, when Robert discovered that the Einhorn family wanted to contact him privately, he reported it directly to George III. This not only expressed his loyalty but also maximally prevented the Einhorn family from playing tricks. If Robert had even a slight hesitation, the later he reported to George III, the more damaging the future rumors would be. Duchess Georgina also grew up in the Augustus family's nest of conspiracies, having seen too many instances where mud on one's crotch is taken for shit, meaning even if it's not true, it looks like it is. Based on this alone, she believed Robert was an extremely intelligent and resolute person. In contrast, Avon seemed like someone who only knew how to play schemes and tricks, completely lacking loyalty. However, considering that the hunter pathway includes the conspirer sequence and her past opponents, Duchess Georgina felt that Avon's behavior was normal. So, she didn't bother to correct him and continued to ask, "Don't talk about Robert Horn for now. First, tell me about the demigod who infiltrated Backland. Who is he? How did you discover him? Were you discovered by him?" Seeing this, Avon knew that Duchess Georgina had already believed his pre-arranged explanation and would definitely help solidify Robert's loyal image with George III when she returned. That demigod is Maxim. He is the deputy captain of the Fasak Empire's Eternal Night Legion commander's personal guard. Nominally, he is only a sequence 5 feet harvester, but in reality, he is a sequence 4 feet iron-blooded knight. As for how I discovered him, perhaps my reputation for liking beautiful women is too well known, so he actually had the princess responsible for lurking in Backland personally approach me. But he underestimated my strength and I easily saw through him. I also took the opportunity to turn his scheme against him and traced him through this line. So it was him. I know him, but I didn't expect him to have been promoted. Hearing Avon's introduction, the Duchess, who had maintained a stern expression from the beginning, finally showed a hint of excitement. Before coming to Backland, Duchess Georgina had been stationed at the border of Winter County, defending against the Fasak Empire's Eternal Night Legion. Therefore, she was not unfamiliar with the Eternal Night Legion commander Ahomatova Einhorn and his trusted aides, though she didn't know Maxim was a demigod. However, it was precisely because the Loan Kingdom never knew this person was a demigod that it indicated he was Ahomatova Einhorn's most trusted subordinate. Otherwise, there would be no need for a demigod to silently disguise himself and be ignored by everyone. There was a similar person in Military Intelligence Section 9 who silently did dirty work for the Augustus family, the Deputy Director of Military Intelligence Section 9, Kunis Kolb, who was outwardly a sequence 5 feet mentor of disorder, but actually a sequence 4 feet Earl of the Fallen. So it was him. I know him, but I didn't expect him to have been promoted. Hearing Avon's introduction, the Duchess, who had maintained a stern expression from the beginning, finally showed a hint of excitement. Before coming to Backland, Duchess Georgina had been stationed at the border of Winter County, defending against the Fasak Empire's Eternal Night Legion. Therefore, she was not unfamiliar with the Eternal Night Legion commander Ahomatova Einhorn and his trusted aides, though she didn't know Maxim was a demigod. However, it was precisely because the Loan Kingdom never knew this person was a demigod that it indicated he was Ahomatova Einhorn's most trusted subordinate. Otherwise, there would be no need for a demigod to silently disguise himself and be ignored by everyone. There was a similar person in Military Intelligence Section 9 who silently did dirty work for the Augustus family, the Deputy Director of Military Intelligence Section 9, Kunis Kolb, who was outwardly a sequence 5 feet mentor of disorder, but actually a sequence 4 feet Earl of the Fallen. So, the Duchess immediately realized the importance of this person, and Avon's subsequent words made her even more uncontrollably excited. After I showed a slight willingness to cooperate, they not only offered Twilight Vice Admiral Bratov Ivan as a meeting gift but also agreed to provide me with intelligence on the Fasak Empire's Sunia Sea Navy. Chapter 422, Ahomatova Einhorn's Desperate Situation. As a demigod who had been on the front lines against the Fasak Empire for many years, Duchess Georgina was very familiar with her direct enemy and had heard about the internal struggles within the Fasak Empire's army, which were divided by angels. In fact, this was the case within all countries on the North Continent. It would be strange if the army were monolithic. It was only because the Einhorn family controlled the hunter pathway, and the army power they held involved the status and strength of various angels, that the competition seemed even more intense. Due to the outbreak of the Industrial Revolution and the craze for colonizing the southern continent, the importance of the Navy had become increasingly apparent over the past century, leading to national resources increasingly favoring the Navy. In the Loan Kingdom, because of the existence of the Storm Church, the Army's backlash was suppressed first, and the Navy's upgrade and transformation were completed. It was no accident that the ironclad was successfully built first at the Pritz shipyard. However, it was not so easy for the Fasak Empire. Even with Dante Einhorn mediating, it was not smooth sailing. It is a common occurrence for various countries to sell out their own people, to enemy nations, using the enemy's hand to eliminate those they dislike, and there are even established private communication channels for this. However, Ahomatova Einhorn's decision to send someone to secretly contact the Horn family this time and offer to betray the Sunia Navy was still very unusual. This indicated that Ahomatova Einhorn truly wanted to make a significant deal, so much so that she distrusted existing communication channels and instead opened new ones that no one would have imagined. Do you think this is credible? Realizing the potential opportunity, Duchess Georgina could not hide her excitement and was eager to try. I think it should be credible. To some extent, Ahomatova Einhorn sending Maxim to contact Robert Horn this time might not genuinely be to incite the Horn family, but more likely to achieve her goal of selling out the Fasak Empire's Sunia Navy. It's just that Robert Horn's position is special, having reached a level where he can influence the Loan Kingdom's military strategy, so selling to him might be more convenient. I even suspect she isn't afraid of Robert Horn betraying her to you, because this matter is also beneficial to your Augustus family. Ahomatova Einhorn must have also guessed that the Loan Kingdom would adjust its strategy recently. As long as you are determined to adjust your strategy towards the Fasak Empire, you will certainly not be able to refuse the great gift Ahomatova Einhorn offers. Of course, if Robert Horn can truly be successfully incited, it would also be an unexpected surprise for her, a win-win situation. Every time Avon thought of Ahomatova Einhorn's methods, he felt that she was definitely a rare schemer, almost infallible, leaving people with little choice but to follow her ideas. What made Avon even more wary was that her style of plotting was actually similar to his own. Her schemes were closer to overt strategies, and she liked to firmly grasp the initiative. People often dislike looking in a mirror, and for a schemer who was very much like himself, murderous intent surged in Avon's heart. Duchess Georgina also agreed with Avon's insights, but she still had one unresolved doubt. Your analysis makes a lot of sense, but why is Ahomatova Einhorn so eager to target her own navy? Is it merely due to the so-called military budget competition? Have their conflicts truly escalated to such an extent? Based on past experience, betraying one's own people usually requires immense benefits, otherwise, it would be a losing proposition. After the form of warfare evolved from land-based confrontations to the current sea-land coordination, even if Ahomatova Einhorn herself wanted to attack the Loan Kingdom from the ground, she would certainly need the Navy's support. Tactically selling out the Navy and messing with teammates occasionally might be acceptable, but directly selling off the Navy would ultimately not be good for her. Something major must have happened within the Fasak Empire, which made Ahomatova Einhorn determined to sell off the Navy. Duchess Georgina's doubts were also a question that Avon had been pondering for a long time recently. However, relying on his understanding of schemes and human nature, as well as his observations during this period, Avon finally sorted out some ideas. Oh, do tell, what could be the reason? Although she disliked Avon's character, Duchess Georgina did not deny Avon's talent for intrigue, which could be seen from his responses and suggestions during the Great Riot of Backland. A post-mortem analysis revealed that Avon's advice to Prince Grove maximized the delay of the three great churches' actions, providing immense convenience for the subsequent population write-offs and destruction of evidence. Although many accidents occurred later, such as Prince Grove's unexpected death and the mysterious deaths of two demonesses from the demoness sect, these were not Avon's fault and did not diminish the value of his advice. The situation between the Fasak Empire and the Loan Kingdom is clear. War is inevitable, and it is very likely to be a fight to the death, a decisive battle until one side completely surrenders. Just as the Loan Kingdom's defense department is working day and night to formulate war plans, the Fasak Empire must also be making various preparations for the future war. Therefore, by observing what the Defense Department is arguing about recently, one can infer what the Fasak Empire's internal debates are about. This was a problem Avon only realized 2 days ago when he attended a high-level army meeting chaired by Robert at the Defense Department. Upon hearing this, Duchess Georgina felt a flash of inspiration and blurted out, "The Defense Department's argument, the argument over the main attack direction." Exactly, it's the argument over the main attack direction. The Navy wants to first attack the industrial zones along the Fasak Empire's continental seacoast to weaken the Fasak Empire's logistical supply capabilities. The Army, on the other hand, wants to bypass the Horasis Mountains, borrow passage through the Intis Republic's Champagne province, sweep away enemy forces between Syllabus County and the Fasak Empire's St. Malone City, and open a direct route into St. Malone City. These two plans respectively make the Navy and the Army the main attacking force, requiring the other side to assist. Whichever plan is ultimately approved will gain dominance in the future war and receive a significant allocation of national resources. In other words, during joint operations, the other party must obey their command. But how could this be possible? No general would allow his army to be subordinate to the other side, let alone obey their command. In short, both sides were arguing fiercely over these two plans, almost coming to blows. Avon, as a commanding officer of an army unit, was called to meetings but had no right to speak, and he had witnessed several major dramas these past few days. Moreover, these people's arguments were not like parliamentary debates where a gentlemanly demeanor was maintained. They often resorted to physical altercations by the end, so after every meeting, someone would always walk out of the conference room bruised and battered. Overall, because George III wanted a quick victory and leaned towards the army's plan currently had a slight upper hand. You mean that similar disputes within the Fasak Empire are close to being decided, and their navy's plan has gained the upper hand? Duchess Georgina understood Avon's meaning and asked in return. Precisely, I believe this can only be the reason. Otherwise, there's no logical explanation for Ahomatova Einhorn's eagerness to connect with Robert Horn. According to both sides' assumptions, the next major war could be a war of annihilation. If he succumbs to the Navy this time and allows the Navy to take the lead in the war, he himself could be marginalized. We all know that in the Fasak Empire, where strength is revered and only the fittest survive, even an angel is not safe and can be replaced at any time. The hunter pathway is the most competitive and rapidly changing pathway. Even if the Einhorn family established a stable empire, the empire's national system still could not prevent intense internal struggles, merely slightly easing the conflicts. Adding fuel to the fire, the war god church also particularly revered the courageous, encouraged resolving grievances through combat, despised and rejected useless elderly and disabled people, and encouraged young people to challenge authority. Therefore, among the Fasak Empire's royalty, with the exception of Dante Einhorn, the founding emperor of the Fasak Empire, who, as the unique Sequence 1 Conqueror Archangel, has never been successfully challenged, other angels have long been replaced several times over. It is said that the youngest angel in the Fasak Empire is now only a little over 100 years old. The number of angels who died at the hands of their own people is even greater than those who died in all previous major wars, which is also a characteristic of the Fasak Empire. In fact, it's not just the Fasak Empire. The Intis Kingdom, which once had the Sauron family as its royal family, was in a similar situation, though with some differences in detail. According to Avon, a large part of the reason for the problems with the Sauron royal family's conqueror Archangel more than 100 years ago was internal strife. However, even though the Sauron family had long declined, and Intis had undergone Rosal's reforms and the establishment of the Republic, this love for chaos characteristic still had a profound and lingering influence. This can be seen from the Intis urban residents' fervent enthusiasm for street politics and demonstrations, as well as the Intis Republic government's strong inclination towards color revolutions in other countries. Speaking of which, the Eternal Night Legion can be said to be the strongest army, apart from the Imperial Guards protecting the capital, St. Malone City. Because the Imperial Guards rarely go to the front lines, the Eternal Night Legion is effectively the Fasak Empire's primary army. Ahomatova Einhorn has commanded this army for 500 years. In these 500 years, he has resolved one conspiracy after another targeting him, some from external sources but more often from within. His hands are already stained with too much blood of his own kin, including his bloodline descendants. Too many Einhorns want him dead, desiring his Beander characteristic. It's even possible that Dante Einhorn is among those who want him dead, as Ahomatova Einhorn is now the most likely angel within the Einhorn family to challenge him. Therefore, it is conceivable that once the war of annihilation against the Loan Kingdom is led by the Navy, and Ahomatova Einhorn loses power, countless internal enemies might emerge to tear him apart. To be pessimistic, he might have already been abandoned by the Einhorn family and could be taken down before the war between the two nations. To persuade Duchess Georgina to take this matter seriously, Avon revealed all his speculations from this period. The deeper Avon delved into his research on the Faesac Empire, the more he felt that the Faesac Empire was a giant, breeding ground, fundamentally lacking the structure of a normal country. In contrast, the countries established by the Augustus and Castia families, who controlled the arbiter pathway, were much more stable internally and resembled proper nations. However, both, influenced by historical processes, embarked on different paths. The Loan Kingdom, with the checks and balances of the Storm Church and the Church of the Night Goddess, was not a stagnant pool. The Fenaport Kingdom, due to the War of Perjury 700 or 800 years ago, led to the kingdom's division, the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom becoming independent, and the Church of the Earth Mother dominating. This made the Fenaport Kingdom, like the Faesac Empire, too deeply influenced by deities and churches internally, and coupled with its advanced agriculture, the entire nation fell into stagnation. And as two major systems, divine favorers, and divine graced, emerged within the Church of the Earth Mother, coupled with Emperor Rosel's use of the Arbiter Blasphemy card to instigate internal strife and a series of other factors, the Fenaport Kingdom, from top to bottom, fell into stagnation. In short, all countries on the North Continent had more or less such problems. Duchess Georgina listened to Avon's extensive analysis and pondered for a long time. Avon's analysis of Ahomatova Einhorn's precarious position within the Einhorn family sounded alarming at first, but upon closer thought, it made a lot of sense. Because the historical context was there, and because the Faesac Empire had always been regarded as the greatest enemy, the Augustus family had done no less research on the Faesac Empire. Therefore, by combining Avon's analysis with the family's internal analysis, it was easy to reach the same conclusion. I had underestimated this sealed artifact that had actually plotted to become human. But then again, it was a sealed artifact created by Emperor Rosel sacrificing a demigod, so it's normal for it to be somewhat special. His active participation in this incident itself should not be purely motivated. He must have seen an opportunity in it and wants to obtain the Beander characteristic of a war bishop from Ahomatova Einhorn. This is good. He has no right to demand benefits from Ahomatova Einhorn. The only way to achieve his wish is to rely on the Augustus family. I imagine if I entrust this matter to him, he will handle it diligently. Duchess Georgina, feeling she had grasped Avon's intentions, secretly decided to let Avon take on this risk. If it succeeded, it would be her credit; if it failed, she would shift the blame to him. This was also a good opportunity for her to prove herself and to silence those who questioned her. Chapter 423 Puzzle completed. Since you're so interested in Maxim, then the task of contacting him falls to you. I'm sure you won't disappoint us, will you? Duchess Georgina rattled off a leadership-specific platitude, as if the success or failure of all matters depended solely on subordinates, and if they messed up, it was entirely not the leader's responsibility. Unfortunately, while this statement worked well on others, it had no effect on Avon. Upon hearing it, Avon didn't humor her at all, smiling and directly saying without hesitation, "There's nothing to be interested in. I was just fulfilling my duty, investigating him incidentally while monitoring Robert Horn. This matter is too significant, involving an angel. As someone of low position and limited power, it's difficult for me to grasp the nuances. It would be much safer for you to handle it personally. I believe even His Majesty the King would wish for an Augustus to personally oversee this matter." Duchess Georgina was choked for words. It had been a long time since she encountered a subordinate who dared to openly refuse a task, so much so that for a moment, she didn't know how to respond to Avon's words. If it were anyone else who dared to openly push a matter onto her, she would have long since acted to make him understand why flowers are so red. But Avon was truly too special, so special that Duchess Georgina simply had no right to punish him. This wasn't because he was an important chess piece for monitoring and checking Robert Horn, but because of the new army he was about to establish. As Avon continuously poured his efforts into the new army, its combat effectiveness began to show. George III had already begun to regard this unit, which everyone currently didn't pay much attention to, as another important force he could control. Especially when formulating the war against the Faesac Empire, everyone had already started to calculate their own gains and losses, constantly forming a situation of mutual sacrifice, making Avon's newly formed new army increasingly likely to become a crucial chess piece influencing the direction of the situation. Some within the Augustus family also recognized the importance of the new army and had secretly proposed to separate the new army from Avon's control, to be commanded by an Augustus and members of the family. However, George III, after weighing various factors, still rejected this proposal. On one hand, in his eyes, Avon was the one who signed the angel contract, so there was no need to worry about him betraying them. On the other hand, Avon was a demigod of the hunter pathway, and when facing the Phasac Empire's army corps, he would not be too passive, and could better unleash the combat power of the new army. Besides this, George III still letting Avon command this army also had an unspeakable ulterior motive. That was, he hoped Avon would become the one mentioned by the Angel of Destiny who would revitalize the Horn family, which could greatly reduce countless obstacles when inheriting the Phasac Empire's legacy in the future. Therefore, in George III's arrangements, Avon's current position was very high, even on par with Robert, who could help him complete his godhood ritual. So, even though Duchess Georgina was nominally Avon's direct superior, in reality, she couldn't control Avon's fate at all. Looking at Avon, who seemed completely unconcerned, Duchess Georgina secretly clenched her fists, but ultimately did not vent her anger. You can use the name of the Augustus family to gain some benefits during your contact with Maxim, such as the magic potion formula for a war bishop. The Augustus family can vouch for you on this. To be honest, Duchess Georgina really wanted to bypass Avon and directly contact Maxim. But after thinking it over, she could only reluctantly abandon this decision. First, approaching him directly would put her at a disadvantage in negotiations from the start. Moreover, even if she were willing to make certain concessions in subsequent negotiations, there was no guarantee that Avon, whom she had bypassed, wouldn't deliberately cause trouble. Given Avon's consistently displayed cunning, the possibility of him ruining her plans was very high. She had already concluded that Avon highly valued this opportunity to contact Maxim, and his refusal earlier was merely to pressure her, wanting to obtain more authorization from her, not truly wishing to reject the task. Conversely, if she were to personally contact Maxim, she would certainly be seen as a thorn in Avon's side. Precisely because of this realization, she no longer wanted to beat around the bush or play coy with Avon. Instead, she directly offered Avon a condition, one she believed Avon would be unable to refuse. Upon hearing the condition offered by Duchess Georgina, Avon couldn't help but secretly roll his eyes, but still smiled and thanked her for her support. He wanted to ask for benefits from Duchess Georgina just to maintain his cunning persona. If he didn't put on this act, she could easily detect something amiss afterward. For him, simply getting permission to contact Maxim was enough. This way, he could lead all parties into the trap he designed, leaving no traces. After discussing matters related to contacting Maxim, Avon glanced at the myriad lights of Backland and said with a smile, "You've been wandering all over Backland lately. Are you looking for the demoness who disappeared from Edsac Augustus's side?" Duchess Georgina was about to leave, but hearing this, she could only stop, frowning deeply, and looking at Avon, she said, "How do you know about this? Have you seen Triss recently?" Avon scoffed at Duchess Georgina's questioning, saying, "What's so hard to guess? The demoness sect hasn't sent anyone back to Backland during this time, so it's clear there's a rift between you due to the deaths of those two demonesses. And it's not like I haven't seen Triss before. Just a little more thought about the great battle that occurred at Red Rose Manor, and it's not hard to guess what you're doing now." Duchess Georgina pondered for a moment, not answering directly, but instead said playfully, "What, do you want to get involved in this? Or do you have news of Triss? I'm about to contact Maxim and don't have time for this matter. It's just that you were quite cooperative earlier, so I wanted to give you a reminder. Searching for Triss isn't about blindly looking, you need to learn to use your brain, to figure out what she cares about most right now. Only by understanding this will you be able to follow Triss's line of thought and find her." Triss, for the safety of Edsac Augustus, deliberately showed her traces a few times. Unfortunately, her plans all turned into winking at a blind man, a wasted effort. Duchess Georgina, who was responsible for finding her, didn't connect this matter to Edsac Augustus at all. Because Duchess Georgina also hadn't expected the primordial demoness's vessel to actually fall in love with a man, it challenged her worldview too much. "You know what Triss is thinking." Duchess Georgina looked at Avon in surprise, her face full of disbelief. Avon had to link Triss's actions with Edsac Augustus to justify his deduction. So, if you want to find Triss, you can't put Edsac Augustus under house arrest, you have to release him to create an opportunity for capture. Duchess Georgina listened, dumbfounded. She couldn't imagine how the primordial demoness's vessel could have genuine feelings for a man, it was simply unbelievable. However, when all the pieces were put together, it seemed perfectly logical and could explain many previous events. Didn't they say Triss would gradually transform into the primordial demoness? Is this how the transformation happens? I remember Triss wasn't a man, was she? Can a man fall in love with another man? Could the primordial demoness, who collaborated with death to unleash the pale disaster, actually just be a love-struck fool? Wait, wasn't the primordial demoness also rumored to have been a man? And who did she fall in love with? Was it Death from the southern continent? Duchess Georgina felt like she had stumbled upon some incredible gossip, god-level gossip. No, don't think about it anymore, this is an evil god. Thinking too much will only bring trouble upon oneself. Amidst her shock, Duchess Georgina's thoughts gradually veered off into a strange direction, and she herself noticed this. After reluctantly suppressing her inner thoughts, Duchess Georgina looked at Avon and said directly, "Just tell me what you want to do, stop beating around the bush." After their previous exchange, Duchess Georgina had figured out how to communicate with Avon. No playing games, or he would play even more games with you. You had to be direct and get straight to the point. I want you to release Edsac Augustus and let him continue to serve the new army. Don't forget, he is still nominally the highest person in charge of the new army, and I am merely his deputy. Initially, to work on Edsac Augustus and to reduce resistance to the establishment of the new army, Avon had once suggested to George III through Robert to appoint Edsac Augustus as the nominal leader of the new army. And Edsac Augustus, to escape the reality of being under house arrest, had also actively participated in this matter and put in a lot of effort. And then, catch Triss when she tries to elope with him. Duchess Georgina scoffed, retorting disdainfully. She felt Avon had suddenly become unusually naive, such an obvious ploy, who couldn't see it? So what if they can see it? A strategy that can be seen through but not broken is a good strategy. As long as Triss still cares about Edsac Augustus, you never have to worry about Triss causing trouble elsewhere. Just being careful about Edsac Augustus's whereabouts will be enough. Before this, Triss was just causing trouble everywhere to highlight Edsac Augustus's importance, so you wouldn't kill him. Now, by releasing Edsac Augustus, you are essentially giving Triss a clear objective, to rescue Edsac Augustus. This is like putting your contest on the table. She can only react passively, performing on the stage you've set, giving you home field advantage. This is much more convenient than blindly running around following Triss's erratic actions, isn't it? Avon showed no mercy in his retort to Duchess Georgina's sarcasm, directly snapping back, almost calling her stupid. Duchess Georgina's first reaction was anger, but she quickly calmed down. After careful consideration, she felt Avon's suggestion was very constructive. But she couldn't bring herself to admit she was stupid, nor could she suppress her annoyance and unenthusiastically thank Avon for his advice. In the end, she could only grumble, "I will report to His Majesty, you should hear related orders in a few days," and then left the iconic Backland building. Avon watched Duchess Georgina's retreating figure, a triumphant smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. His meeting with the Duchess tonight had achieved all his goals. First, through a process of refutation, he once again proved Robert Horn's loyalty to George III. Second, by revealing his ambition, he openly obtained the right to contact Maxim. Third, through Duchess Georgina, George III's most trusted confidant, he ascertained George III's current assessment of him, no longer needing to worry about the new army being taken away. Although he already knew this possibility was very small, it wasn't non-existent. Lastly, he helped Edsac Augustus, to a certain extent, escape his current predicament, giving Triss in the shadows a sense of reassurance, allowing her to resolutely obey orders and follow instructions in her subsequent actions. In short, through tonight's meeting, Avon's plan of action targeting various forces completed its final puzzle piece. Now it was just a matter of following the steps. The world situation is becoming increasingly chaotic due to my interference, and my actions should adjust accordingly. This morning, at the Defense Department meeting, Avon had heard a briefing on the situation in the southern continent. The numinous episcopate and the Aegis family had both been drawn into the true creator's actions against the Rose school of thought. The involvement of these forces further fueled the current chaotic situation in the southern continent, even forcing the colonial activities of various nations there to temporarily halt and shift to a wait-and-see approach. It wasn't that the various nations didn't want to intervene in the southern continent's situation, but rather that the situation in the north continent had also undergone drastic changes. The Loan Kingdom and the Faesac Empire being on the brink of war was the precursor, and border frictions between the Fanepotter Kingdom and countries like Lumburg also suddenly escalated. Meanwhile, Intis had quietly passed the Wartime Mobilization Act, closely monitoring the actions of other nations, ready to enter the fray at any moment. The North Continent seemed to be engulfed in the smoke of war overnight, and even various hidden organizations took the opportunity to frequently operate. All forces sensed an unusual atmosphere. The entire world situation, to use a phrase from his previous life, was the calm before the storm. Although the situation deteriorated faster than Avon had previously expected, Avon was not discouraged by it. Instead, he felt a sense of eagerness. Let it be chaotic, let it be chaotic. The more chaotic the world situation, the more advantageous it is for me. Chaos is a ladder to progress. Avon stood before Big Ben, looking at the red moon in the sky and the myriad lights below, his heart surging with emotion. Chapter 424, Meeting a Homitova Einhorn. On the banks of the Tassoc River in the outskirts of Backland, at the ruins of an old warehouse. Maxim, dressed in a neat leather jacket and a black soft cap, stepped on thick fallen leaves, walking through the ghost-like ruins. From time to time, eerie wolf howls could be heard in the distance. This place was originally Backland's largest cargo distribution center, storing goods transported from all over the world via canals. However, as maritime trade flourished and sea transport costs became increasingly lower, the corresponding inland river transport costs became higher and higher, and the transport volume could no longer meet the growing demand. This led to the increasing dilapidation of the area, with most warehouses abandoned, becoming a sparsely populated and complex and regulated zone where many illicit activities took place. As a distinguished iron-blooded knight, Maxim's late-night visit here was certainly not for entertainment, but because someone had arranged to meet him here. Looking at the dilapidated surroundings, Maxim's doubts did not diminish. He had never imagined that the other party would arrange to meet him here. In his opinion, even for his own safety, the other party should have chosen the center of Backland, or at least met in the Backland urban area. Why choose such a remote place? Does Ewan Horn really not worry about me having ill intentions towards him? Maxim had reviewed Avon's relevant information and had a comprehensive and detailed understanding of him. In the heart of this iron-blooded knight, Avon was an impeccable hunter, one who did not bring shame to his bloodline. But it was precisely because of his approval of Avon that Maxim found it hard to imagine Avon entrusting his life to someone he had never met, especially someone from the hostile Faesac Empire. Therefore, after receiving the message from Alice that Ewan Horn wanted to meet him here, Maxim had been hesitant about whether to come, as this arranged meeting reeked of something unusual and could very well be a trap targeting him. However, the pressure from a Homitova Einhorn was also increasing for him. With no progress on Robert Horn's end, if he couldn't make a breakthrough with Ewan Horn, he wouldn't need to go back. So, after much deliberation, Maxim finally decided to take the risk. Thinking of this, Maxim's heart grew even more vigilant, ready to respond to any potential ambush. Just then, a clear laugh came from not far away. Maxim stopped in his tracks, abruptly turned around to look in the direction of the sound, and found Ewan Horn, who had appeared on the roof of a warehouse less than 200 meters away from him at some unknown time. This set off alarm bells in Maxim's mind. His entire body transformed into a blue-white flame, then, bang! It exploded into more than a dozen flames shooting in all directions, only to reconverge on a warehouse roof 1,000 meters away, reforming into a burly human figure. Although he didn't understand how Ewan Horn had infiltrated within 200 meters without him noticing, the nervous Maxim didn't dwell on this point, choosing to first create distance. But just as he stood firm and manifested his form, Maxim hadn't even had time to breathe a sigh of relief when he turned his head and saw a terrifying sight. Ewan Horn appeared on a rooftop not far, not close, about 200 meters from him, and in his hand was a black soft cap, the very one Maxim had been wearing. Maxim felt a chill run through his body, his legs like lead, not daring to take another step. Avon, on the other hand, was playing with the hat in his hand, feeling very surprised. The last time he ambushed the war bishop, Bach Einhorn, besides obtaining his Beander characteristic, he also gained a Demon Hunter Beander characteristic. This time, he had only intended to give Maxim a warning, but he unexpectedly had an extra gain, a sealed artifact crafted from a Sleepless Pathway Sequence 4 Nightwatcher Beander characteristic. It was obvious that this must have been a Homitova Einhorn's spoils of war from the last conflict, bestowed upon Maxim for his duties. With such a useful sealed artifact in hand, he never once used it on me or Klein. I wonder if he's confident in himself or in Alice's loyalty. This sealed artifact retained the ability to pull people into dreams, and many often found it difficult to lie in dreams. Yet, Maxim never once used it on himself and Klein, which Avon found truly incomprehensible. Although both of them were favored by the Evernight goddess and protected by her, they would not be affected by dream power at all. This sealed artifact was clearly meticulously crafted by a specialist. Its side effects were relatively minor compared to the grade 1 sealed artifacts Avon had seen. Wearing this hat would induce 1 hour of deep sleep every day, which was equivalent to an hour of unconscious coma. What's the name of this hat? Avon slipped the soft cap onto his finger, twirling it casually, and asked in a familiar tone, like a customer asking a small vendor the price of a hat. Maxim watched his hat spin continuously on Avon's finger, his face already very grim, veins bulging on his hands. He said with absolute certainty, Marauder Pathway. You have a Marauder Pathway sealed artifact. This was the conclusion Maxim reached after calming himself down. Congratulations, you guessed correctly, but there's no prize. You haven't answered my question yet. Avon completely ignored Maxim's grim expression and continued to ask with a smile. Everyone underestimated you, Ewan. Einhorn. You have already crossed the threshold of a demigod. Maxim gradually calmed his emotions. He neither answered Avon's question nor asked for the item back, avoiding self-humiliation. Instead, he directly changed Avon's surname from Horn to Einhorn, thereby reminding Avon who stood behind him and not to forget the cooperation they were to discuss. Avon naturally understood the faint threat in Maxim's tone but didn't care at all. He casually put the hat he was holding onto his own head, looked at Maxim, and said with a smile, "After all, I am a legitimate member of the Einhorn family. Since I've embarked on the path of a hunter, it wouldn't be right to disgrace our ancestors' bloodline, would it? Honestly, if it weren't for the restrictions of potion ingredients, I feel like I could have advanced even faster." Avon's words almost choked Maxim, but he couldn't refute them because he was absolutely certain that the person in front of him was Ewan Horn. And precisely because he was certain of this, his heart was already profoundly shocked. A 23-year-old demigod. Aside from ancient times and those born demigods, are there any demigods this young now? He certainly hadn't seen any in the Fasak Empire. Maxim understood that all his previous assumptions, guesses, and preparations were in vain. If he couldn't handle tonight correctly, this place might very well be his burial ground. After a long silence, Maxim no longer mentioned the sealed artifact that could not be retrieved, but instead turned to serious matters. You have such a great advantage yet you don't act. It seems that although Alice's intelligence on you is full of errors, her statement that you are not averse to contacting us is true. Tell me, what exactly do you want to do? Maxim now realized that Alice's approach and successful defection were the result of the person in front of him's guidance. This was the least bad outcome for him, because it at least indicated that Ewan Horn was indeed willing to establish contact with them and had something to ask of them. His mission had not failed. On the contrary, it had made progress, only the initiative had changed hands. More importantly, it meant his safety was temporarily assured. I want to see a Homitova Einhorn. Avon directly stated his demand. All right, as long as you come with me to the border, I guarantee that the Lord will see you. Maxim hadn't expected Avon to make this condition and was somewhat puzzled, which made him extremely irritated. Avon sneered, looking into Maxim's eyes, and said with a cold tone, "Do you take me for a fool? Go to the border to meet him, just to wait for his true body to arrive and capture me. Then what do you mean? You're the one who wants to see the Lord, and I'm willing to introduce you, but you're worried about all sorts of things. What exactly do you want? You are a member of the Eternal Night Legion, meaning you are under a Homitova Einhorn. I don't believe you can't arrange for me to meet a Homitova Einhorn directly. Don't forget, when Dante Einhorn made his move in Backland the month before last, I was watching from the sidelines and saw everything clearly. During the Augustus family's joint action with the Steam and Machinery Church to expel Ouroboros and target the Life Counselor, Dante Einhorn, using the body of Bach Einhorn who had infiltrated Backland, intervened from afar and disrupted the Augustus family's plans. This incident was already known to anyone with a certain status in the Beander world. However, Maxim hadn't expected Avon to have personally witnessed that battle and understood its details, so he could only nod helplessly, without further excuses. In fact, a Sequence 3 war bishop could already project their consciousness onto their subordinates, but Avon didn't want to expose his knowledge of the war bishop, so he used that battle as an excuse. As for why Maxim didn't suggest that a Homitova Einhorn could project her consciousness onto him, it was because such a method caused immense harm to the possessed person. In a way, it was a form of contamination, causing the possessed person to transform both internally and externally towards the possessor. Just as Triss would become more and more similar to the primordial demoness. However, Maxim was also a decisive person. Once he knew he couldn't avoid it, he immediately began to pray. Master of War Mist, symbol of changing weather, totem of storms and lightning, great Homitova Einhorn. Your subordinate has met Eowyn Horn and discovered that he has already advanced to become a demigod. He also requests a meeting with your highness. As soon as the words fell, Avon, not far away, felt Maxim's aura change. A sudden clap of thunder inexplicably appeared in the sky, a mountain collapsing roar echoing across the wilderness. Accompanying the thunder was a sudden gust of wind. The fierce wind whistled past, sweeping up scattered leaves, and dust flew everywhere, as if a hurricane had passed. Avon narrowed his eyes, looking at Maxim, who had turned around, not at all avoiding the scrutiny of those unfamiliar eyes. After a moment of silence, Avon finally spoke, "Greetings, Your Highness Ahorva. Thank you for gracing me with your presence." Regardless, the other party was an angel, and Avon still had to show some respect. A Homitova Einhorn, looking through Maxim's eyes, sized Avon up and down, then also said with a smile, "Indeed, a young talent of my Einhorn family. To become a demigod at such a young age, your future is limitless. However, I am a little curious about one thing. Where exactly did your iron-blooded night potion come from? I wonder if you could enlighten me." Although a Homitova Einhorn's tone was gentle, Avon detected an undeniable firmness in it. Clearly, if Avon couldn't explain this matter, she wouldn't mind turning hostile. Avon's heart tightened, and he couldn't help but sigh inwardly, the old fox is truly sharp. As mentioned before, due to the frequent turnover of Hunter Pathway demigods and their excellent practicality in warfare, various factions were collecting relevant Beander characteristics. As a result, over time, it became almost common knowledge who possessed how many Hunter demigod Beander characteristics or sealed artifacts. So, the question arose, where did Avon's Beander characteristic for becoming an iron-blooded knight come from? From the Augustus family. While not impossible, a Homitova Einhorn's first thought was Bach Einhorn, who had been lost in the Loan Kingdom. Avon wasn't afraid of a Homitova Einhorn turning hostile. After all, she wasn't a Sequence 1 conqueror like Dante Einhorn, and the possessed Maxim wasn't a Sequence 3 war bishop like Bach Einhorn. Therefore, she absolutely couldn't exert an angel's full power at this moment. And since she couldn't exert an angel's power, Avon was absolutely unafraid of her. However, Avon's purpose in meeting her face to face this time was not to fight, so he couldn't completely break ties. Fortunately, Avon had not expected to be able to hide it from a Homitova Einhorn before meeting her, and he had anticipated the questions, so he smiled slightly and calmly said, "Of course, it came from the Beander characteristic of your kinsman, Bach Einhorn. Where else could it have come from? Then does the Augustus family know that you obtained Bach Einhorn's legacy?" A Homitova Einhorn asked another question that struck at the core. The Faesac Empire had once been willing to follow old customs and exchange a frenzied mage Beander characteristic for the war bishop Beander characteristic. However, the Augustus family did not make the exchange according to past practice and had never admitted to having eliminated Bach Einhorn. Within the Fasak Empire, it was also deduced that a third party had eliminated Bach Einhorn. If the Augustus family did not know that Bach Einhorn's Beander characteristic was in Avon's hands, then it meant that at least Avon and the Augustus family were truly not aligned. Chapter 425, The Old Fox and the Young Fox. The Augustus family doesn't know that I advanced using Bach Einhorn's Beander characteristic. Avon stated his prepared excuse without hesitation, only adding in his mind. Because my Beander characteristic came from the sealed artifact, Bonaparte's fortitude, given by the Augustus family. Avon stuck to his old trick, using absolute truth to lie. After Avon finished speaking, Ahomatova Einhorn didn't feel provoked or angry. Instead, he stated with certainty, "Your visit today to see me shouldn't just be your own idea. Robert Horn must also be behind this, right?" Ahomatova Einhorn's words sounded like a question, but they were actually an undeniable statement. Avon smiled and nodded, now without any intention of hiding anything. "State your objective. You can't genuinely want to return to the Einhorn family, can you?" Ahomatova Einhorn would never believe that the Horn family brothers wanted to surrender and rejoin the family. Everyone else might surrender, but the Horn family brothers could not. Their surrender would only result in them being completely devoured by the Einhorn family, dying a more miserable death than anyone else. Ahomatova Einhorn didn't believe the Horn family brothers couldn't see this point. Even when he previously sent Maxim under the guise of persuading them to surrender, he never expected it to truly succeed. Of course not. On the contrary, I am here to persuade you to return to the orthodox line, set things right, and realign yourself. You should be very clear about what happened back then, and you should also understand who the true heir of the Einhorn family is. Now that you are in a predicament and your time is short, this is an excellent opportunity to find another way out. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly solidified into a deadly silence. Clearly, Avon's words had stunned Ahomatova Einhorn. PFFT, ha 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 ha. Ahomatova Einhorn suddenly burst into a resounding laugh that shook all directions, so much so that tears seemed to appear in the corners of his eyes, as if he had just heard the most absurd and funniest joke in the world. Even the strong winds that had not ceased since his possession of Maxim suddenly disappeared at this moment. Avon, however, was deaf to Ahomatova Einhorn's mockery, merely watching him silently, a faint smile always on his lips. As Maxim's face grew increasingly flushed, the laughter finally gradually subsided. The moment the laughter stopped, Ahomatova Einhorn's red eyes instantly turned cold, fixating on Avon. He spoke in a chilling tone that could make one shiver. "I thought the successor of the Horn family in this generation would be an exceptionally intelligent person, but I didn't expect him to be just a lunatic suffering from delusions. Even if you might possess some capital, you should not delude yourselves into thinking you can make me submit to you." Avon met Ahomatova Einhorn's gaze, feeling as if countless ice blades were piercing his entire body, causing extreme pain. But his heart remained without the slightest tension. It was still the same point. Ahomatova Einhorn was not a conqueror, and Maxim was not a war bishop. "Is that so? If I didn't know you wanted to use us to cripple the Fasak Empire's naval plan, I would truly believe you were someone unyielding. By the way, do hunters possess unswerving loyalty?" "Why don't I know?" "Because there was no concern for his life safety," Avon retorted without any reservations. Upon hearing Avon's words, Ahomatova Einhorn's aura faltered. Faced with such blunt sarcasm, he surprisingly did not refute, but merely looked at Avon with a searching gaze, saying nothing. Seeing this, Avon understood that he didn't want to show weakness, and considerately didn't continue to be sharp-tongued. Instead, he continued with a smile, "You don't need to be surprised, and no one leaked your predicament to us. It's just that we compared the current internal disputes in the Loan Kingdom, stood in your position, and combined it with the history of the Einhorn family to think one step further, which allowed us to understand all of this." Ahomatova Einhorn thought about it and felt that this explanation was somewhat plausible, secretly breathing a sigh of relief. Just a moment ago, he truly believed there was an internal spy near him, tipping off the Horn family brothers. "Even if I am currently in a predicament, I am not at your mercy. The Horn family, to put it nicely, is an orthodox branch of the Einhorn family. To put it less nicely, it is merely a stray dog, a bargaining chip in the hands of the Augustus family. What right do you have to scheme against me? Why don't we, you and I, work together, one from within and one from without, to support each other and grow stronger together. Trust me, by cooperating with me, you will not only gain an extra retreat, but in the future, we might even become a true family. For you to advance to a demigod at such a young age, you are clearly very suited for the hunter pathway. I can give you the magic potion formula for a war bishop, allowing you to prepare the ritual in advance. Once you digest the magic potion, you can advance using Bach's Beander characteristic. Since his true situation had been seen through by the Horn family, Ahomatova Einhorn simply stopped pretending and directly laid out his conditions, willing to cooperate equally with the Horn family, and even generously offered to give Avon the sequence 3 war bishop magic potion formula now. Ahomatova Einhorn was truly getting anxious now. On one hand, the Fasak Empire's naval plan was imminent and could be implemented at any time within the next month. On the other hand, the Horn family's strength and ambition far exceeded previous expectations, making the previously prepared conditions seem insufficient. He could only temporarily raise the stakes and hoped Robert and Avon would be clear-headed. Avon raised an eyebrow in disdain upon hearing Ahomatova Einhorn's conditions, but he did not refuse. Very well, Senior. This is your first contact with us, and it's understandable that you don't fully trust our strength and are unwilling to be beneath us. We will gradually demonstrate our capabilities in future collaborations. Senior, your urgency in contacting us clearly indicates that a major operation by the Fasak Empire's navy is threatening you. What kind of operation is it? Seeing Avon nod in agreement to cooperate, Ahomatova Einhorn also breathed a sigh of relief. Things hadn't developed in the worst possible direction. If the Horn family brothers, relying on their slight leverage, intended to subjugate him through his current predicament, then he would have no choice but to turn hostile and take action. Even if he couldn't eliminate Avon Horn, he would expose him to the various factions. No matter what, he was an angel, even a tiger in distress should not be bullied by dogs. At the same time, he also speculated on the true strength of the Horn family, which made them so presumptuous as to want to incorporate him, an old angel. Could it be that Robert Horn had already advanced to become an angel? That's impossible. How could the Augustus family allow such a thing to happen? Even if George III agreed, other members of the Augustus family would not. But if that wasn't the case, then what reason gave the Horn family brothers such great confidence? Could it be that a deity, or even more than one deity, stood behind them? Numerous complex thoughts flashed through Ahomatova Einhorn's mind, but he temporarily pushed them aside. Now, revealing the intelligence he had obtained to Avon was the most important thing. Harold Einhorn has turned a high-ranking official in the Rosed Islands, and he could seize the Rorstad archipelago at any time with the cooperation of an insider. From what I've heard, he even has the confidence to achieve this without bloodshed. Harold Einhorn, Fasak Empire Sunia Sea Naval Commander, Sequence 2 Weather Warlock, was the angel Avon paid the most attention to when gathering intelligence at sea. Avon was very surprised by the intelligence provided by Ahomatova Einhorn. He hadn't expected such a thing to happen. It wasn't that he was surprised by the Fasak Empire Sunia Sea Navy's designs on the Rosed Islands. After all, the Rosed Islands were the biggest obstacle for the Fasak Empire to directly attack the Loan Kingdom's mainland. He was surprised that Harold Einhorn actually had the confidence to take down the Rosed Islands without bloodshed. Moreover, Avon didn't believe Ahomatova Einhorn would lie to him about this matter, because lying to him would bring no benefit. Do you know who Harold Einhorn has turned? Several names flashed through Avon's mind. Combining them with the original story, he gradually had a clue, but still cautiously asked. I don't know. I only know that he will take action very soon. Our time is running out. Ahomatova Einhorn emphasized the word, "are," reminding Avon that this matter was also a threat to the Horn family. On this point, Ahomatova Einhorn was not wrong. For Robert and Avon, the most unfavorable situation in a future war would be the defeat of the Loan Kingdom, leaving them, like their ancestors, as stray dogs living in constant fear, let alone dreaming of taking down the Fasak Empire. And once the Rorstad archipelago was swiftly taken by the Fasak Empire, the Loan Kingdom would face the most severe strategic situation from the outset of the war with the Fasak Empire, making it difficult to retaliate. The reason is simple. If the Rorstad archipelago falls, then the entire maritime territory of the Loan Kingdom will be unsafe. The ironclad fleet, built at great expense, will become a coast guard, preventing the Fasak Empire from landing by sea. After losing the Rorstad archipelago, the Weather Warlock can use it as a base to extend his war mist across the entire Sunia Sea. Within the angel-level war mist, the Storm Church will have a significant amount of energy tied up, and the advantages of storm pathway beyonders on the ocean will be maximally weakened, unable to exert their proper strength. The Storm Church might even eventually be forced into a defensive battle for Passu Island. At the same time, the communication channels between the Loan Kingdom's colonies and its mainland would also be cut off. The Loan Kingdom would be unable to obtain necessary strategic materials from outside until it recaptured the Rorstad archipelago. The Loan Kingdom, which previously held a decisive advantage on the sea, would not only lose its greatest strength but also fall into a huge predicament. Because the Loan Kingdom's coastal territory is a vast plain, with no natural defenses. Therefore, neither Robert nor Avon could stand by and watch this happen. You don't need to emphasize it, I know that point. Besides this, do you have any other information to provide? Avon was also extremely grateful at this moment. Fortunately, he had met with a Homitova Einhorn this time, otherwise, it might have truly led to a grave mistake. In the original work, the situation between the Fasak Empire and the Loan Kingdom was not so severe at this time. So, Harold Einhorn's plan to seize the Rorstad archipelago was entirely a butterfly effect caused by Avon. If he had really succeeded, then Avon would truly have shot himself in the foot during this period. There is no other information. This little bit of information was only obtainable because of the mole I planted there in advance. How about it? Can you stop Harold's operation this time? And how do you plan to stop it? Ahomatova Einhorn was now more concerned about the safety of the Rorstad archipelago than anyone from the Augustus family. One might even mistake him for an Augustus. This matter is too significant. I need to discuss it with Robert before making a decision. Moving forward, if we need to contact you, will it still be through him? Avon naturally couldn't say he would contact him through his honorific name, so he pointed at Maxim and asked knowingly. Ahomatova Einhorn still hoped Maxim would help find the demoness named Triss, so he naturally couldn't tell Avon that Maxim would remain in Backland. Therefore, he wanted to give Avon the impression that Maxim would leave Backland after completing his mission, so he said, Maxim's purpose in coming to Backland this time was to establish contact with you. Now that his mission is complete, I have other matters that require his attention, so he will leave the Loan Kingdom tonight. From now on, you will contact me through Alice Einhorn. She is actually not some minor princess, but my most valued and beloved biological daughter. Ahomatova Einhorn, without batting an eye, recognized Alice as his biological daughter right in front of Avon. Avon suppressed his smile, saying with a surprised expression, "Oh. I didn't expect her to truly be a genuine princess. I was indeed disrespectful earlier. Don't worry, she will be absolutely safe in Backland. No one will be able to harm a single hair on her head." After speaking, Avon bowed and then transformed into a ball of flame, flying away like a meteor. The commotion caused by the Weather Warlock's arrival was still too great. Avon estimated that the three great churches and military intelligence Section 9 would soon react to the unusual lightning and strong winds here and would arrive shortly. And Ahomatova Einhorn, who witnessed Avon's departure, whispered instructions, telling Maxim to no longer contact anyone else and secretly search for Triss, before also leaving Maxim's body. Maxim, who regained control of his body, dared not linger. He also transformed into a ball of flame, rapidly moving away from this desolate place. Chapter 426, The Fasak Empire and the Aurora Order grow closer. When Maxim returned to Backland, he didn't go back to his usual stronghold, the Earl Café. Instead, he cautiously wandered around the city, attempting various anti-reconnaissance measures. Although he believed that if Ewan Horn was still monitoring him at the time, Ahomatova Einhorn's eyes would surely not be deceived. But Ewan's silent appearance within 200 meters of him earlier, without being detected, had indeed left a significant psychological shadow on him. He wondered how Ewan Horn had managed it. Was it the effect of the Marauder Pathway sealed artifact he possessed? That was possible. After all, Sequence 4 of the Marauder Pathway was called Parasite, which was very good at hiding itself. He hadn't had time to ask the Great One about it. After much circling, finally confirming that he wasn't being followed, Maxim naturally began to review what had just happened. From beginning to end, I was the fish being caught. Fortunately, the Two-Horn family brothers also wanted to use me to contact the Great One. Otherwise, my head might have already moved. This was a blessing in disguise. However, this operation still caused me to lose a lot of points in front of the Great One. Because Ahomatova Einhorn had communicated with Ewan through his body, Maxim could be said to have witnessed the entire exchange and probing between the two parties, and also felt the various emotions Ahomatova Einhorn herself experienced. Although Ahomatova Einhorn herself didn't say much, Maxim still felt her inner humiliation. The humiliation that the Two-Horn family brothers dared to scheme against her, the humiliation that he himself was forced by Harold Einhorn's pressure, and the humiliation that even in the face of such disgrace, he couldn't turn hostile and could only speak kindly to him. It was precisely because he felt the humiliation in the Great One's heart that Maxim was extremely terrified at the time, worried that he, as a bystander throughout the process and the intermediary for this meeting, would be purged and silenced. Fortunately, he was still useful to Ahomatova Einhorn, so his worries ultimately did not come to pass. Maxim was determined to find the demoness named Triss. Only by successfully completing this task could he possibly make the Great One forget what had just happened, and only then could he survive. As for betraying Ahomatova Einhorn and seeking another path, Maxim hadn't even considered it. Unless he had the protection of a true god or His Majesty Dante Einhorn, as a member of the Eternal Night Legion, his life and death would always be in her hands. Gradually, Maxim arrived at a villa in the West District, near the Empress Borough. He openly walked in, right in front of the guards at the entrance. The guards watched him enter without stopping him, clearly very familiar with him and having seen him many times. Upon entering the villa, he was greeted by a young man whose appearance was exceptionally handsome, enough to grace the cover of a fashion magazine. "I've been here many times, just to see Mr. Z and discuss a big business deal, but Mr. Z has always avoided me and hasn't given me a definite reason. This isn't the way to treat visiting guests." The young man saw Maxim's displeased expression but didn't mind, instead smiling and saying, "Mr. Z has been busy with some matters recently, so he's not in Backland. He's not deliberately neglecting guests. And today, you're very lucky. Mr. Z happens to be here today and has agreed to see you." O'Sullivan had been tasked by Ewan to lure a demigod during this period, and the psychological pressure was immense. Hearing that his mission was finally over today, he let out a long sigh of relief. Maxim was very pleased to hear this and immediately stood up, saying, "That's good. Lead the way quickly." O'Sullivan bowed in salute, then led Maxim through a downward passage into a basement. It looked very spacious, yet exceptionally dim, and the decor was more like a temple. In the center of the underground hall was a 3-meter-tall inverted cross, with a giant hanging upside down on it, its legs bound by chains, its hands spread out, and a huge single eye. In front of the giant stood a person wearing a divine robe and a golden mask, praying devoutly to the giant sculpture. He only turned around after Maxim walked up to him. As Mr. Z turned around, Maxim finally, relying on his spiritual intuition, confirmed that the other party was also a demigod. But thinking about it, it seemed normal. If he wasn't a demigod, how could he face him alone? "Maxim, Vice Commander of the Eternal Night Legion Commander's personal guard. You've sought me out repeatedly, what is the matter?" Ewan turned around, waved O'Sullivan away, and then directly revealed Maxim's identity, striking him a heavy blow. Maxim's heart tightened, and for a moment, he was too shocked to speak, because he wasn't showing his true face at this time. As Ahomatova Einhorn's dirty glove, he had long ago been granted the ability to change his appearance like a faceless in the Eternal Night Legion, using the authority of a hunter angel, allowing him to change his appearance at will. Even Ewan Horn, whom he greatly feared, didn't know his identity. How did the person in front of him know? He had only told his identity to Alice, who had just been recognized as a princess by the Great One. Logically speaking, no one in all of Backland, except Alice, should know his identity. Could Alice have fallen into the hands of this person? Although his heart was turbulent, Maxim's face showed no expression. Instead, he laughed heartily and said, "Sir, have you mistaken me for someone else? How could I be a member of the Eternal Night Legion?" Mr. Z. Ewan was noncommittal and didn't press the issue, but instead asked knowingly, "What do you want from me?" Maxim felt a bit helpless when Mr. Z didn't dwell on his identity. He actually wanted him to press on, as only then could he get more information and trace the source of the leak of his identity. But the other party's light touch left him hanging, neither up nor down, in midair, feeling extremely uncomfortable. However, Maxim quickly adjusted his emotions and first brought up the main topic. I want to know what happened at Red Rose Manor a few months ago. After all, Mr. A was a direct participant in that incident. It seems Ahomatova Einhorn has also set her sights on that missing demoness. But why should I tell you about it? What reward can you offer me? Ewan looked at Maxim with leisure, very curious about the price he would offer. Although getting Triss to connect with the Fasak Empire was his initial plan, he didn't mind earning a little extra benefit. Maxim hadn't expected to get information from the Aurora Order for free, so he was prepared and said, the Aurora Order has a major operation in the southern continent. I can have the Fasak Empire's colonies assume a state of combat readiness, deterring the currently restless colonies of the Loan Kingdom and Lumberg, and relieve you of many worries. With Grisha's actions in the southern continent, the true creator's subordinate Foss's actions against the Rose School of Thought were no longer a secret. So, Maxim's targeted offer of this bargaining chip was very sincere. Not enough. Actually, Ewan was quite tempted by this offer, as it was a bargaining chip that could directly support Grisha. But Ewan still wanted to push his luck and see if he could extract more benefits. Not enough. Maxim frowned slightly, his gaze fixed on Mr. Z, who was less than 5 meters away, calculating whether he could use force to threaten him. But as soon as he had that thought, his spirituality began to warn him, frantically stopping his wild ideas and pulling him back to reality. This is the Aurora Order's home ground, and I just lost the Helmet of Serenity. I still can't be too impulsive. I think this price is already very reasonable. This is what your Aurora Order needs most right now. Don't be too greedy. Although the spiritual warning told Maxim that Mr. Z opposite him was very dangerous, Maxim didn't feel completely powerless, so he still negotiated the terms with a strong stance. In his eyes, Mr. Z was somewhat insatiable. If they couldn't reach an agreement this time, he would simply spread rumors about their transaction afterward, and the other divine envoys of the Aurora Order wouldn't let Mr. Z off the hook. Attacking the Rose School of Thought is the most important task assigned by the Lord. You actually gave up the assistance of the Fasak Empire for some petty gains. Tell me, have you abandoned your faith in the Lord? I'm going to kill you. Based on his understanding of the Aurora Order, Maxim believed the above scenario was absolutely possible. Mr. Z. Ewan showed no reaction to Maxim's threat, instead smiling and saying, Mr. Maxim misunderstood. Your offer just now is enough for me to tell you what happened at Red Rose Manor. The reason I said, not enough, is because you haven't given me a price to introduce you to Triss. Maxim's eyes lit up, and he somewhat uncertainly confirmed again, you mean, you can let me meet Triss herself? That's right, so your offer just now is not equivalent, only one transaction can proceed. Maxim was overjoyed, truly getting what he wished for. Just now, he was thinking that he must find Triss to salvage his lost points with the Great One tonight, and unexpectedly, things progressed in just 2 hours. However, he quickly calmed down and began to consider what price he should offer, but he immediately realized that no matter the price, it wasn't something he could afford. Even the bargaining chip of using the Fasak Empire's forces in the southern continent to support the Aurora Order's actions wasn't something he offered, but rather a decision made by the angels within the Fasak Empire. When the Fasak Empire discussed how to deal with the impending Great War, cutting off the supply of war resources from the southern continent colonies to the Loan Kingdom was of paramount importance. Because even if the Fasak Empire was arrogant, they didn't think they could crush the Loan Kingdom in one go. Breaking through the Loan Kingdom's border defenses in a year would be considered smooth progress. So, Ahomatova Einhorn took the opportunity to propose supporting the Aurora Order's actions in the southern continent, allowing the Aurora Order to counterbalance the Loan Kingdom and even the Intis Republic. Because the true creator, the eternal blazing sun, and the god of storms are absolute arch-enemies, and there isn't such a big conflict with the god of combat, whom the Fasak Empire worships. The Aurora Order's activities in the Fasak Empire are also rare, with no accumulated grievances, so there is a lot of room for cooperation between the two sides. Ahomatova Einhorn didn't believe that when the war between the Fasak Empire and the Loan Kingdom entered a stalemate, the Aurora Order could resist the urge to attack the colonies of these two nations. Before, the Fasak Empire had actually been secretly contacting the Rose School of Thought, hoping that the Rose School of Thought would do this at a critical moment. However, the Rose School of Thought, considering itself in a position to be courted by both sides, had always played hard to get, only accepting benefits without responding. That's right, not only was the Fasak Empire secretly contacting the Rose School of Thought, but the Loan Kingdom, the Intis Republic, and the Fainapotter Kingdom were all secretly contacting them as well. This was also one of the important reasons why the Rose School of Thought had never been completely eradicated. But ever since the Aurora Order largely withdrew from the North Continent, concentrating its forces to strike at the Rose School of Thought and driving them back repeatedly, the Fasak Empire discovered that the Aurora Order might be a better target for courtship. After all, the fickle Rose School of Thought might stab you in the back if the situation became unfavorable, while the Aurora Order would absolutely not do such a thing. Therefore, Maxim's use of cooperation in the southern continent as a bargaining chip to exchange for information about Triss actually implied the Fasak Empire's attempt to seek cooperation with the Aurora Order, or rather, with the true creator behind the Aurora Order. This was also why Ahomatova Einhorn insisted on destroying the Navy's plan, because both the Navy's plan and his plan targeted the southern continent's blood transfusion to the Loan Kingdom. However, the Navy's plan was more effective and cost less than his plan. This is actually two transactions. Should we conduct the first transaction first, and then the second? After all, I didn't expect you to be able to find Triss, so I wasn't prepared at all. Maxim now desperately wanted to achieve something to salvage his failure with Ahomatova Einhorn, and the sooner the better, so as to minimize the losses. Alright, if you sign this contract, I can tell you what you want to know. Saying that, Ewan pulled out a contract that looked like it was made of gold and placed it in front of Maxim. An angel-level contract. Where did he get it from? Maxim carefully examined the contract in front of him and found that it was a blank contract. He couldn't help but sigh that Mr. Z was quite rule-abiding. Then he picked up a pen and wrote down his conditions, and then, in front of Mr. Z, squeezed a drop of blood from his finger and dripped it onto the contract. Ewan nodded in satisfaction upon seeing this. After putting away the contract, he said, Triss is the divine descent vessel of the primordial demoness. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.